Chapter 29. Chapter 29. Take a saber attack from me. You have to be careful, he's in the 9th layer of body refining tier. Furthermore, his nickname is Saber Maniac. He never jokes around when talking about sabers. Zhu Shui cautioned. If your cultivation level is not above the 7th layer of body refining tier, then it's better if you don't take his attacks head on. Ling Han nodded with a smile, and said, I only need to take one attack from you? Just one. Li Hao continued to say very coolly and arrogantly, looking like some kind of master swordsman. Very well, come on then. Ling Han did not boast of his own abilities, nor did he display any disdain towards his opponent. He only nodded very calmly in response. Li Hao moved and arrived in front of Ling Han. His right hand was placed on the hilt of the saber at his waist, but he made no move to draw it out yet. His left foot was in front, while his right foot remained at the back. His upper body leaned slightly forwards, his expression one of complete concentration. Ling Han was slightly surprised. This guy actually looked a little decent, and vaguely had the bearing of a swordsman. Li Hao drew his saber abruptly, and a flash of cold light blazed and slashed swiftly towards Ling Han. Ding! A sharp sound echoed and sparks flew. Ling Han managed to draw his sword in time, scraping it against the blade of the saber. However, the long sword did not go against the saber head-on. Instead, it drew all the way from the saber's tip right to the saber's hilt, and in this way managed to dissipate the heavy weight of the saber. The sword's movement was extremely quick. Li Hao's saber attack was unexpectedly ended. Zhu Shui and the rest of her companions were all shocked. The power Ling Han displayed in this one strike was obviously only the 7th layer of body refining tier, yet he managed to dissolve Li Hao's full power slash, exhibiting more than exceptional sword skills. You pass. Li Hao nodded, a very arrogant expression on his face. Yet Ling Han gave a flick of his long sword, and said, You too should take an attack from me. Haha, are you testing me? Li Hao gave a big laugh. Although Ling Han managed to take a saber attack from him, this did not signify that he would be able to fight on even footing with him. These were completely two different issues. Something like that, Ling Han said with a smile. Do you dare? Then bring it on, Li Hao said confidently. When they exchanged blows previously, he had confirmed that Ling Han's cultivation level was only in the 7th layer of body refining tier. Although the two of them were both similarly in the late stage of body refining tier, the difference of 2 layers was still very distinct. The sword in Ling Han's hand moved in an elaborate manner and suddenly pierced forwards, aiming directly at Li Hao's neck. Li Hao naturally did not fear Ling Han's attack. He brandished his saber in a block. With a ding, the long sword stopped its approach right in front of his throat, missing by a hair's breadth. You've lost. Ling Han withdrew his sword. I clearly blocked your dash. Li Hao was just about to speak, when he saw that Ling Han gave a flick of his sword, and a ray of white-colored cold light flashed swiftly. Sword Chi! Lu Dong and his company simultaneously gasped in shock. Li Hao could not help the darkening of his expression. He naturally knew the power of Sword Chi, so he nodded and said, I've lost! If Ling Han had released Sword Chi just now, then he currently would only be a dead body. Lu Dong and company were shocked half to death. The fact that Ling Han had managed to parry Li Hao's saber previously had already made them feel very impressed. But now this was actually a guy who had even formed Sword Chi. He really was inconceivable. Li Hao's fighting spirit rose again, and said, Let us spar once more. He had not yet experienced a battle with someone who could form Sword Chi. This was a rare opportunity. Very well! Ling Han nodded in agreement. He had a slight intent to train Li Hao as he thought that this brat would be able to step onto the path of an actual swordsman. As he spoke, his right hand flicked, and his long sword once again flashed out. Li Hao naturally would give it his best, and hurriedly brandished his saber in a slash. He wanted to use the weight of the saber to force Ling Han to fly out of the spar. He opted to attack instead of pure defense. Ding 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 ding! The two fighters battled fiercely. Li Hao was not instantly killed this round. However, he suffered quite a bit as Ling Han had started to use sword qi, which left many wounds on Li Hao's body. Tens of moves later, Li Hao decisively surrendered. If they continued to battle, he might really bleed to death. "Sword qi is indeed powerful," he said, both frustrated and excited. Should he be able to form saber qi, then the situation might be completely different. "Do not be discouraged, you are already quite skilled," Ling Han said aptly. Although he had not spent much time on sword arts in his last life, how intelligent was he? Moreover, he had once achieved the summit of Heaven Tier. His 1 day's training would be comparable to a year's training of a person in body refining tier, or even a few years' training. Just how old was Li Hao that he could actually spar with him? Zhu Shui and company were both shocked and overjoyed. Their shock was due to the fact that Li Hao was the strongest amongst them yet was still unfit to be Ling Han's opponent. Their joy was because their chances of obtaining the green spiritual fruit had increased greatly now with the help of such a master swordsman. The group of 7 set off on their way to where the green spiritual fruit was located. "So it seems that Brother Ling is the heir to the Ling clan of Grey Cloud Town. That's strange, we should have long heard of a genius existence like Brother Ling." On the way to their destination, Ling Han had become the focus of the 5 young people's attention, and so naturally was barraged by their questions. This was normal. His predecessor had no idea that he had possessed an immortal grade spirit base, either did he know the 5 elements heaven grade skill. It'd be strange if he was well known. Ling Han only answered that he had been more subdued in the past, and thus deflected this question. Though Zhu Shui and her companions also had much interest in Lu Yutong, she was icily silent all the while, and Ling Han too did not seem like he was going to introduce her, thus they could only feel curious in their hearts. Close to an hour later, they finally arrived at an extremely moist place. In front of them, there suddenly appeared a cave. They hadn't even entered the cave yet but could already smell a disgusting stink. However, they could vaguely see a plant that was about a meter tall. Its stem had no leaves, looking like a sugarcane. However, there hung several fruits from it, neither too many nor too few, exactly 7 of them. "If we go any closer, we'd be affected by the miasma poison. We must hold our breaths if we want to advance forwards. That miasma cloud beast is very cunning, it would definitely not leave the sphere of influence of the miasma poison. We have to draw that miasma cloud beast out. As long as we can obstruct it for a few breaths' time, we'll be able to extract the spiritual fruits. Miss Lu and Shui will be responsible for extracting the green spiritual fruits. Us 5 men will be in charge of obstructing the miasma cloud beast. Agreed?" This was mostly directed at Ling Han. They would both have 1 person on the team obtain the fruits to avoid either party snatching the fruits and fleeing. Ling Han smiled and nodded. If they knew what Lu Yutong's cultivation level was, then they probably might not offer this kind of suggestion. "We have to draw the miasma cloud beast out first. If we start the battle in the cave, then we would not be able to take advantage of our superior numbers," Zhou Chang said. "And..." The 5 men all drew out their respective weapons, banging them against each other to create a clamor. It took only a while before a creature which looked similar to a wild hog ran out of the cave. There were air sacs all over its body that kept on releasing a gray fog. 2 long, thick fangs protruded outside its lips, looking like 2 short spears, exuding a strong pressure. This was the miasma cloud beast. With its power, it could be considered to be in the upper echelons of the body refining tier's demonic beasts. The miasma cloud beast appeared at the cave entrance, yet it did not attack. It only growled deeply and bared its teeth at the 5 humans in front of it. The air sacs all over its body continuously released a gray fog, forming a dark cloud above it. "Let's go!" Zhou Chang gave a loud shout and made the first move. Lu Dong, Qin Pingju and Li Hao followed closely behind. The 4 of them simultaneously brandished their respective weapons and flew towards the miasma cloud beast. However, Ling Han made no movement. Instead, he stayed behind, silently watching. 4 against 1. Although Li Hao and his companions had the advantage in numbers, under the continuous influence of the poisonous miasma, They could not display their full prowess and very quickly were on the losing side. They could not help feeling very worried. Hadn't they made an agreement to join forces and attack together? Why was Ling Han just standing there by the side and watching? Shua! Right at that moment, Ling Han drew his sword quickly, as if he was moving at the speed of light. Chapter 30. Chapter 30. Hang Zhan, who charged out midway. This sword move was really very cleverly timed, as the miasma cloud beast had just defended against the combined attacks of Lu Dong and his companions, and its defense had weakened, creating an opportunity for Ling Han. Shua! The long sword waved, seemingly like a deity descended from the heavens. With a pu sound, the sword pierced through the right eye of the miasma cloud beast and deeper into its body, driving in all the way until the hilt. Pun! The miasma cloud beast fell heavily onto the ground. It was actually killed in one blow. What? Mother! See! Lu Dong and the others, including Zhu Shui, who had been in hiding, inhaled sharply in shock. That was an actual miasma cloud beast, one of the strongest amongst demonic beasts in body refining tier. And yet, it was killed in one blow. How could they accept something this unbelievable? But immediately, they took to their heels. If one spoke, they would naturally inhale air. They had all inhaled a bit of miasma poison just now, thus they had to circulate their respective cultivation techniques as soon as possible to dissolve the poison. Otherwise, their internal organs could very likely corrode. After a while, Lu Dong was the first to walk towards Ling Han, and patting his shoulder, he said, "I thought you brat were already scared to the point that you couldn't move. But you're actually so strong. Your one strike could actually be so swift. Haha, Brother Ling is truly powerful to actually kill the miasma cloud beast in one blow," Li Hao said. To be able to witness such a clean, decisive slash, he too felt immeasurably excited since he was a swordsman himself. Ling Han only smiled. The lower the cultivation level, the easier it would be for one with a lower cultivation level to challenge someone with a higher cultivation level. Moreover, the miasma cloud beast had had most of its attention focused on Lu Dong and the rest just now, which gave him the chance to kill it in one strike. If it was a one-on-one battle, Ling Han would definitely not be able to fight the miasma cloud beast on even grounds, unless he had taken the antidote to the miasma poison beforehand. After the miasma poison had dissipated, they plucked the green spiritual fruits one by one, but did not damage the plant itself. The plan they came up with just now was because they were short on time, and so could only choose to uproot the plant. But now that the miasma cloud beast was dead, they naturally had no need to do such a thing. This, after all, was a natural spiritual medicine. Damaging it would equal damaging the harmony of nature. 7 green spiritual fruits, they each could obtain one. However, though Lu Yutong had put hers away, she would definitely hand it over to Ling Han later. "Hung, leave the spiritual fruits behind!" They heard a cold voice speak. 2 men walked over to them, one in front while the other remaining behind. One was young while the other was old. The younger one seemed to be about 20+ years old, while the older man appeared to be about 70 or 80 years old, with a head full of white hair. The speaker was the young man. He was walking in front, while the old man followed him from behind like a servant. Ling Han glanced at the approaching pair. With the insight of a warrior in heaven tier, he could immediately tell that the young man was in the 9th layer of body refining tier, while the old man had already reached the 9th layer of element gathering tier. "Who do you think you are to be so arrogant?" Lu Dong immediately stood, yelling at the unknown young man. However, that young man's gaze swept over Zhu Shuiyi's dainty figure and beautiful face, revealing a covetous expression. Then, he disdainfully said, "You don't even know I Hang Zhan? Then you should have heard of Stone Wolf Sect, right? I am the eldest grandson of the 7th elder of Stone Wolf Sect." Stone Wolf Sect. Hearing these 3 words, the expressions on the faces of Lu Dong and the others all changed into ones filled with dread. In Rain Country, one couldn't casually proclaim themselves a sect or a faction. Faction, sect, association, and society, from highest to lowest, these were the 4 different levels. Only a party that possessed a warrior of the spiritual ocean tier could claim to be a faction. One with a master in the gushing spring tier could be proclaimed a sect. A party that only had a warrior in element gathering tier could be claimed as association, while society would be those in the lowest category. The Stone Wolf sect was the greatest party within 1,000 miles. According to rumors, the 9 great elders were all warriors in the gushing spring tier, while the sect master was an individual standing at the pinnacle of the 9th layer of gushing spring tier. If this Heng Zhan was telling the truth and his grandfather really was the 7th elder of the Stone Wolf Gate, then he indeed had a terrifying background. Ha ha ha, now do you know who I am? Leave the spiritual fruits and all of you break one of your arms, then you can get lost. However, these 2 girls must stay behind. Heng Zhan once again looked at Lu Yutong. Although he could not see her face, her graceful figure still caused his heart to throb. With his rich experience of encounters with women, this girl definitely had to be a beauty. Lu Dong and his fellows were extremely furious. They could leave behind the spiritual fruits, but to actually have each of them break one of their arms. Should a martial artist break his own arm, that would be the same as destroying his own future. Zhu Shui shivered. She knew why he wanted her to stay behind, and this made her feel disgusted, furious and fearful, all at the same time. Do you still intend to resist me? Heng Zhan smiled coldly. Elder you, make them feel despair. Yes, young master. The white-haired old man behind him replied respectfully before slowly walking over to them. He originally had a bent figure, being the embodiment of a senile old man. Yet now, his back straightened a bit with each step and his aura kept increasing, quickly causing Lu Dong and the others to pale. 9th layer of element gathering tier. In truth, Lu Dong and the others could not tell what Elder Yu's cultivation level was. They only knew that he was much stronger than them by a large margin. But no matter what layer of element gathering tier he was at, to suppress a few youngsters in body refining tier would be as easy as flipping his hand over. They were finished. Lu Dong and the others looked ashen. Although they were extremely unwilling, they could not help but admit that their backgrounds could not compare with the newcomers. As for comparing their own strength with their opponents, they were also unable to do so. You, take off your veil! Heng Zhan said, pointing at Lu Yutong. The more he stared at Lu Yutong's figure, the more the fire in his heart blazed and the more he wanted to see her true face. Should Lu Yutong's true appearance not reach his expectations, he would definitely kill her in one strike for making him expect this much for nothing. Consequences? Heng Zhan naturally never thought about such a thing. The Stone Wolf sect was the king in this area. As long as they did nothing treasonous towards Rain Country, then so what if he killed a few people? Lu Yutong naturally would not even bother to respond. En? Did you not hear me? Heng Zhan was a little upset. He was used to being arrogant and bossy. The thing that infuriated him the most was if someone dared to disobey his commands. Lu Yutong looked at Ling Han. After seeing the smile plastered all over Ling Han's face, she then slowly reached towards her veil and calmly took it off. In an instant, it was as if their whole surroundings lit up. How could there be such a beautiful girl in this world? What an outstanding beauty! How devastatingly beautiful! Though her demeanor was as cold as an iceberg, it caused one to have an even stronger desire to conquer her. To be able to have this beauty become a charming pet at his knee, what sense of accomplishment would that be? Lu Dong and the rest were amazed to the point of losing their breath first, but then immediately felt pity, for this kind of outstanding beauty was about to fall into the hands of Heng Zhan. Heng Zhan naturally was extremely surprised and joyous. He had never imagined that he would actually encounter such a beauty. His eyes were wide to the point that they seemed as if they were about to pop out. He laughed loudly and said, "Beauty, come here! Be careful, young master, she's in the element gathering tier." Elder Yu suddenly spoke up, his wrinkled face filled with utmost seriousness. He could not tell this woman's actual power. It was possible to see the cultivation level of someone with lower cultivation than oneself, but this required both parties to be at a close enough distance. Just like Elder Yu, he was far beneath Lu Yutong in power, so he could only identify that Lu Yutong's cultivation level had already reached the element gathering tier, but could not tell exactly what her cultivation level was. Lu Dong and his group, as well as Heng Zhan, all experienced a great shock, displaying expressions of complete disbelief. Chapter 31. Chapter 31. Bow your head and apologize. This woman could only be 18 or 19 years old at most, yet she had already reached element gathering tier? But how was it possible that a strong warrior of element gathering tier would actually spout nonsense? Heng Zhan was shocked for a moment, before quickly giving a humph in his heart. So what if she was at element gathering tier? At this age, she could only have just broken through. How would it be possible that she could oppose Elder Yu? Elder Yu, take her down! The lust in Heng Zhan's heart was fully active. Being a cultivator in the body refining tier, to be able to hold down a master in the element gathering tier underneath his body and toy with her, his sense of fulfillment would be overwhelmingly strong, particularly when this girl was of such exquisite beauty. He was very close to being unable to hold himself back. Although Elder Yu had a cautious expression on his face, he too did not think of Lu Yutong as a powerful enemy. After all, the girl was much too young. According to his mindset, the girl may be in the first or second layer in element gathering tier, maybe the third layer, at most. He was someone in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. Although it was not possible for him to break through to the gushing spring tier in this lifetime, but on the plane of element gathering tier, he found few who could actually battle against him on even footing. Young miss, surrender obediently to avoid suffering later. He spoke up. Killing intent flashed through Lu Yutong's eyes. She was the princess of the Lu clan. In front of the 8 great clans of the imperial city, what did a mere stone wolf sect count as? This Heng Zhan actually dared to bear evil intentions towards her. It seemed like he really was seeking death. But when her current position came to mind, she could not help turning to look at Ling Han, a questioning look on her face. Ling Han gave a shrug and said, "This kind of bastard, if you want to kill him, then go ahead." Lu Yutong turned back around, and the powerful aura of the 9th layer of element gathering tier was released without any reservations. It rivaled Elder Yu's aura, and showed no signs of losing. What? Elder Yu quickly paled, breathing out in shock. 9th layer of element gathering tier, how is this possible? 9th layer of element gathering tier? Elder Yu was not the only one to be greatly shocked. Even Lu Dong and his group were flabbergasted, their facial muscles twitching in shock. Let alone reaching the 9th layer of element gathering tier, for someone below 20 years old to achieve element gathering tier was already shocking enough. Lu Dong and his friends had originally thought that even if there was a gap between themselves and Lu Yutong, this gap wouldn't be too far, because they too had already achieved the 8th and 9th layers of body refining tier respectively, and so were only one step away from breaking through to element gathering tier. But the 9th layer of element gathering tier, that was a kind of power they only dared to ponder about as something they would only be able to face at least 8, or maybe even 10 years later. Elder Yu immediately clasped his fists in a polite gesture and said, "Please excuse my young master's previous impoliteness, young Mississippi. I hereby apologize on behalf of my young master." Although both of them were in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, and he thought that he would not lose against this young woman, the problem was that his opponent had already reached the 9th layer of element gathering tier at such a young age, and this was not something that could be done with the support of any ordinary party. In other words, it was her background Elder Yu was scared of. Although Heng Zhan felt upset, and was unwilling to give up, there was nothing he could do. Even if he was an extremely haughty, arrogant man, he wasn't an idiot. He knew that there were some people that he could trifle with, and there were some people that he definitely should not even think of messing with. Lu Yutong belonged to the category of those he definitely should not even think of messing with. Lu Yutong only gave a wave of her hands, and said stiffly, "I won't kill you, get out of my way." What a joke! How could anyone think of committing blasphemy against the princess of the Lu clan and live? "Miss, don't go too far," Elder Yu said in a deep voice. Naturally, he would not just stand aside and watch Heng Zhan die. Lu Yutong did not answer. She raised her hands in an offensive stance. Yellow grade high-level martial arts skill, snapping of the plum hands. Seeing this, Elder Yu knew that this matter could not be peacefully settled, so raised his hands as well, forming claws. Yellow grade medium-level martial arts skill, flying eagle claws, Lu Dong declared. He was best at claw skills, and so knew the characteristics of many different skills belonging to that class. With one glance, he managed to identify Elder Yu's claw skill. Ling Han, will that one from your family have any problems? The 5 of them had already gathered around Ling Han. Lu Yutong was now their only ray of hope. Ling Han smiled softly and said, "She should not." Should not? Lu Dong and his companions were all unsettled. Should not sounded very dubious, but both of the fighters were in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, so really, who could actually say with certainty which one of them would emerge victorious? While they had been conversing, Lu Yutong had already moved, and was now in a fierce battle with Elder Yu. The 2 of them exchanged blows, their figures moving like wind, extremely quick. The 2 fighters were both masters in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. Lu Dong and his group couldn't clearly see their movements, or judge the actual situation. They only felt the blurring of their sight, and had completely no idea who was winning. Heng Zhan naturally couldn't see clearly either. He couldn't help feeling extremely anxious, for if Elder Yu was defeated, he would definitely lose his life as well. So, of course he was worried. But after the battle had lasted for about 3 to 5 minutes, the movements of the 2 fighters had slowed down, not only to the point that Lu Dong and his group could all see very clearly, but also to the point that even they thought that the pace of the battle had become much too slow. However, a hint of prudence appeared on Ling Han's face. Slow did not mean that the 2 fighters were going easy on their attacks. On the contrary, the situation now was even more dangerous, for they had already entered a life-or-death stage. Should either of the 2 of them make even a small, tiny mistake, the result would not just be defeat, but death. He recalled that these few days, whenever he was free, he would be guiding Lu Yutong. Based on his previous cultivation of Heaven Tier, whatever little bit of experience he managed to pass on to a lower-level martial artist would be extremely precious. As long as she had truly absorbed his teachings, there would definitely be a monumental increase in her power. With Lu Yutong's level of comprehension, he believed that she should have understood much of what he had been teaching her. This battle, she should be able to win. Lu Yutong and Elder Yu's battle slowed down even further. One of them was an old master in the element gathering tier who had been at this stage for a very long time, and thus had extremely vast battle experience. Meanwhile, though the other was young, she was a martial arts genius and had a very high level of comprehension. Moreover, she had also benefited much from Ling Han's guidance, and was shockingly powerful in battle. Elder Yu's forehead was already heavily beaded with cold sweat. His opponent was too strong. He felt the oncoming pressure of death, but he dared not be distracted at this moment, not even to surrender and beg for mercy. If he dared pause, he would definitely suffer Lu Yutong's wrathful strike. Lu Yutong, on the other hand, was becoming more and more serene. She was already completely on the winning side. The situation was now extremely clear. Even Lu Dong and his group could see clearly that Lu Yutong was winning, so they smiled, for they saw their worries dissipate. Since they could see clearly, Heng Zhan naturally could see clearly too. He could not help stepping back and retreating, preparing to escape at the first opportunity. "You're in such a rush, where are you headed to?" Ling Han flew forwards like an arrow shot from a bow, blocking his way. "Get out of my way!" Heng Zhan shouted loudly. "I'm from the Stone Wolf sect, and you dare to trifle with me? I'll slaughter your whole family." "How overbearing!" Ling Han drew his sword, his gaze filled with murderous intent. There was nothing worth saying to such a man. The best thing would be to immediately kill him. "Ling Han, don't be impulsive!" Lu Dong could not help shouting out. Should Heng Zhan be killed, none of their clans would be able to withstand the furious rage of the Stone Wolf sect. "Haha, listen to your companions' advice, and never oppose me. Otherwise, nothing but death awaits you." Heng Zhan laughed coldly. "You're fortunate today." He was just about ready to run away and escape. However, he had not yet managed to move from his place when he felt a cool sensation on his neck. A long sword was already pressed against it, immediately causing his whole body to shiver. He felt as if he was almost going to urinate out of fear. "There is no one that I dare not kill," Ling Han said calmly, and his voice turned cold. "Kneel." Heng Zhan did not dare refuse. The freezing cold eyes of the man in front of him caused him to feel a cutting chill. This was clearly a man of his word. "Apologize," Ling Han continued to say. Heng Zhan immediately felt the urge to stand up and spit out curses, but as he felt the freezing sensation upon his neck, he could only bow his head while thinking that as soon as he got back to the Stone Wolf sect, he would definitely have his grandfather personally come to kill all these guys in front of him. Of course, the two beautiful girls would be spared and become his toys instead. "I was wrong, I'm inhumane," he said, begging for mercy. "I hope you will become a good person in your next life," Ling Han said coolly. No dash. Heng Zhan immediately sensed the situation was taking a turn for the worse, but he only felt a sharp pain on his neck as his sight suddenly turned dark. Fresh blood spurted out, causing his eyes to go wide in disbelief. Ling Han actually dared to kill him. At the same moment, Lu Yutong gave a soft cry. With a pat of her small hands, it was as if Elder Yu had turned into stone, showing no signs of movement at all. After a long while, his body finally collapsed onto the ground. "This is going to be a huge catastrophe." Lu Dong and the rest sighed in unison. Chapter 32. Chapter 32, Breaking Through to Element Gathering Tier. Ling Han withdrew his sword and said, smiling, "Will you tell anyone of what has happened here today?" "Of course not." Lu Dong and the rest quickly shook their heads. "It's all right then. None of us present here will say anything, so who would find out that Heng Zhan and his lackey died here?" Ling Han said. However, Lu Dong and his companions were still unable to let go of their worries. After all, the name of Stone Wolf Sect was much too intimidating. Based on its power, the sect could easily eliminate their respective clans 100 times. With such feelings, they dared not linger here for too long, fearing that Ling Han would kill them too to ensure their silence. Moreover, they each possessed a green spiritual fruit in their hands, adding on to the unsettled feelings in their hearts. They soon bid farewell to Ling Han and set off, quickly disappearing from his sight. Killing the eyewitnesses. Ling Han naturally had no such plan, for his little female attendant was the princess of the Lu clan of the Imperial City. Against such a noble existence, what did an insignificant Heng Zhan count as? If the Stone Wolf sect found out that Heng Zhan actually dared to bear evil intentions towards Lu Yutong, they might even personally behead Heng Zhan as an apology. Just as how Lu Dong and his group felt immeasurable fear towards Stone Wolf sect, what did an insignificant Stone Wolf sect count as in the eyes of the 8 great clans? "I'll take one green spiritual fruit first. Once I reach the peak of the 9th layer of body refining tier, I'll take the second one," Ling Han thought. Although he had already walked through all the 9 tiers on his way from the body refining tier all the way to the heaven tier, this did not imply that he could easily step over the gulf between the 2 tiers. That was because, aside from the comprehension and understanding accumulated within a given tier, breaking through the bottlenecks between tiers was an endeavor that required a vast amount of energy to support it. Where did this energy came from? Spiritual medicine, alchemical pills, treasures obtained from demonic beasts, spiritual fluids found in nature could all be used as the source of this energy. Unfortunately, these materials were extremely rare and hard to find. This was the reason why the higher the tier, the fewer martial artists there were that could achieve it. Without these kinds of supporting materials to provide the additional energy for martial artists to break through to a higher tier, the only thing they could do was depend on themselves to slowly accumulate the energy required for the breakthrough. Some would be able to succeed in breaking through, while some may cause themselves to explode from overaccumulation of energy. If he had not had the green spiritual fruit, Ling Han may have needed to accumulate about 10+ days worth of origin power to reach the peak of the 9th layer of body refining tier, and then break through to the element gathering tier in a spurt of energy. But things were different now. When he reached the barrier between body refining and element gathering tier, Ling Han only needed to take the green spiritual fruit, and it would be smooth sailing all the way. Ling Han liberated all the valuables from the bodies of Heng Zhan and Elder Yu. Because the two of them had been on a journey, they obviously had not kept too many valuables on them, so all he managed to find were some money and a book on some secret martial art. The sum of money came up to a total of about 100,000 coins, which could not be considered a small sum. Meanwhile, the book was titled Detonation Arts, and it was a rather unique skill. Basically, it allowed a martial artist to inject his origin power into something which would cause the item to detonate. It would be difficult for someone to defend against such a skill. Elder Yu should have just obtained this secret arts manual, and had yet to start mastering it. Otherwise, if Lu Yutong had been surprised with such an attack in the midst of battle, then she would definitely have suffered quite a bit. The two of them moved to a new location. After all, there were 2 dead bodies in their previous location. Just looking at the 2 corpses would spoil their mood. Ling Han sat down in a cross-legged position. He then took out a green spiritual fruit and washed it with a bit of clean water. Then, he quickly consumed it in large bites. It really did deserve the name of a spiritual fruit born from nature. Even though its level couldn't really be considered high, it was still extremely delicious, and within a few bites, Ling Han had already finished eating it. He felt extremely dissatisfied, and really wanted to take out the other fruit and eat it too. He quickly suppressed this impulsive urge, and quietly waited for the medicinal effects to play out. In but a short moment, a powerful and intense medicinal effect was released, transforming into innumerable tiny particles, entering his bloodstream and spreading throughout his entire body. Ling Han circulated 5 elements heaven-grade skill. The spirit base in his dantian gave out a shimmering light like a lotus flower of the Tao, guiding the medicinal effects to nourish every piece of flesh, every bone, and every vein in his body. His cultivation rate was already very fast to begin with. Before he had consumed the green spiritual fruit, he had already reached the middle period of the 7th layer. Now that he had obtained the support of the spiritual fruit, his progression rate was naturally even more terrifying. The late period of the 7th layer of the body refining tier, the peak of the 7th layer of body refining tier. He accumulated some origin power and, in one breath, broke through to the 8th layer of body refining tier. At this time, the medicinal effects of the green spiritual fruit had not been completely exhausted yet, and were still continuously improving his cultivation. They were finally exhausted once Ling Han made it to the middle period of the 8th layer of body refining tier. Very good, it saved me about 6 days' worth of time. Watching all this, a strange thought rose up in Lu Yutong's heart. It was the first time that she had not been shocked by the quick ascent of Ling Han's cultivation level. After all, this time should be considered normal, as he had eaten a green spiritual fruit. The two of them continued journeying around the mountain. Ling Han continued to refine his sword skills, hoping to achieve 3 flashes of sword chi before he broke through to the element gathering tier. After another 8 days, Ling Han had reached the peak of the 8th layer of body refining tier. After storing up 1 night's worth of origin power, he began the process of breaking through to the 9th layer of body refining tier. By the time morning came and the sun had risen, he stood up, the corners of his lips lifting slightly upwards in a smile. The 9th layer of body refining tier. Very good, I need around another 10 days' time and I will reach the peak of the 9th layer of body refining tier. At that time, I will consume the 2nd green spiritual fruit, and in one breath break through to the element gathering tier. Lu Yutong was naturally already numbed. Should Ling Han be able to break through to the element gathering tier on the morrow, she might very well not feel surprised. Otherwise, if she still became shocked every time this guy did something surprising, she really might die an early death. 10 days passed very quickly and Ling Han, as per his expectations, had already reached the peak of the 9th layer of body refining tier. He took out the 2nd green spiritual fruit, and smiled, saying, "Today is my last day in body refining tier, AI, it really has been a very long time." Lu Yutong could not help rolling her eyes in response. She had been by Ling Han's side since the time when he was only in the second layer of body refining tier. How many days had it been? Just 1 month! This was a very long time he was talking of. But when she recalled how Ling Han had been stagnant for a number of years in the second layer of body refining tier previously, his rueful feeling could be considered quite logical. She started cultivation when she was 13, and achieved the element gathering tier when she was 14. This point alone did make it seem that her cultivation progress had been much faster when compared with Ling Han's. After Ling Han swallowed the green spiritual fruit, he started to break through to the element gathering tier. He did not rush it. Instead, he only started to gather the medicinal effects within his body. Usually, when a martial artist began the process of breaking through, even if they had the support of medicinal effects, they had to batter against the barrier repeatedly until it had somewhat loosened to be able to breach it. However, Ling Han had absolute confidence that as long as he had stored up enough energy, he'd be able to successfully break through this barrier on his first attempt. Half an hour later, his body was brimming with origin power, and he felt as if his whole body was inflated. This was of course but a misconception. It was just that he had stored too much energy within his body, causing him to have this kind of an inflated feeling. But should he still not break through or unleash this energy somehow, his body really might explode because of this accumulation of energy. It was like a water pouch that had already been filled to the brim. If the pouch was not punctured to make a hole to release some water, or if the water wasn't transferred to a bigger pouch, then the only result would be that the pouch would explode. It's about enough, Ling Han thought. Now all that's left is to guide this boundless energy towards the Dantian and batter against the barrier. Body refining tier meant to store origin power in every bit of blood and flesh, and so it was actually very limited in quantity. As for element gathering tier, it meant to open up one's Dantian and form a strange space within one's body. Everyone possessed this kind of a small universe, or a small world, in their bodies. In terms of martial arts, this kind of small world was thought to exist within one's Dantian. Hong! Under the fierce barrage of energy, a slit-like hole appeared in his Dantian. For anyone else to break through, they would have to depend on a continuous, repeated barrage to endlessly widen and enlarge this hole or slit. However, Ling Han was different. The energy he had accumulated was more than enough for him to immediately begin breaking through. Opening up the Dantian was only the first step. The next step was the most important one. That was, to solidify the origin power into a high-speed revolving nucleus. This was something like installing a motor in one's Dantian. With a mental command, the origin nucleus revolving at high speeds would generate energy that would erupt with a horrifying attack. How was it that the element gathering tier could easily crush the body refining tier? That was because once the origin nucleus was formed, energy would gush out like a flood from it. Even if two fighters had accumulated equal amounts of origin power, the one who had actually formed the origin nucleus would have faster, stronger attacks, possessing an overwhelming advantage over his opponent. Chapter 33. Chapter 33, 5 Elements Origin Nucleus. Ling Han's opening up his Dantian could only be considered as being halfway to element gathering tier. He had only raised the upper limit of his internal storage of origin power. The power upgrade depended on whether he could form the origin nucleus or not. The number of those in the 9th layer of body refining tier who had been stuck on this step is unknown, but definitely very big. Martial artists of the element gathering tier could form a total of 9 origin nuclei. Once they had succeeded in forming the 9th, they'd be able to start the process of breaking through to the gushing spring tier. However, for Ling Han, forming an origin nucleus was only a small issue. After all, he had already done it 9 times in his last life. He started to form the nucleus. The powerful origin power stirred, gathered, intertwined and melded together. He was very familiar with this process, and very quickly, the origin power within his body solidified into a nucleus form, as tiny as a hair's breadth. But he immediately experienced a great shock, for within his Dantian, there actually appeared 5 origin nuclei. How was this possible? He had only just broken through to element gathering tier, And now he had already reached the 5th layer of element gathering tier? No, this was an impossible thing, because these 5 origin nuclei were much too small, and were still very far from reaching their pinnacle. He had never heard that anyone had ever managed to form 5 origin nuclei in one go and simultaneously expand them to their pinnacle form. Additionally, the gaps between these 5 origin nuclei was much too small. They had a mutual attraction and repulsion relationship, forming a subtle balance. They were also differently colored, gold, green, white, red and black, respectively. Ling Han's heart skipped a beat. These were the solid forms of the 5 different elemental alignments. These 5 nuclei represented gold, wood, water, fire, and earth, respectively. Could it be that a spirit base with multiple elemental alignments could form multiple origin nuclei? But how was it possible that he had never heard of such a thing in his last life? That's not right. Ling Han carefully examined them and concluded that these 5 different origin nuclei had achieved a perfect balance. Should any of these 5 nuclei be even a little bit stronger, it would destroy that delicate balance. Thus, there would only be one origin nucleus, the strongest, that could survive, in the end, while the other origin nuclei would be pushed aside and shatter. Following this line of deduction, for someone to be able to form 2, 3, 4, or the maximum of 5 origin nuclei, the elemental alignments of their spirit base had to achieve a perfect balance. This would allow the origin nuclei that had been formed to also be perfectly balanced with one another, none of which would be able to swallow the others and vice versa. There were many in this world who possessed 2 elemental alignments, or even 3 or 4. But those who had multiple elemental alignments and actually managed to achieve a perfectly balanced relationship between the multiple elemental alignments in his spirit base were few and far between. Thus, it was a pitiful few that could actually possess 2 or 3 origin nuclei. In his last life, besides burying himself in alchemy, Ling Han had also buried himself in cultivation. He took part in very few actual battles, and so not coming into contact with martial artists that had multiple origin nuclei was nothing strange. Moreover, multiple origin nuclei could become anyone's hidden trump card to turn over the tables and obtain victory. And who would reveal their trump card easily? The 5 origin nuclei would combine together to form a large origin nucleus, which means that I will have origin power 5 times stronger than anyone else. Ling Han thought. This was something very terrifying. For a martial artist to completely exhaust the origin power within his body, they need at least 100+ moves, or even 1,000+ moves. But should he be able to discharge this energy at 5 times the speed? This would mean that the power of every attack would be increased by 5 times. If the power of element gathering tier was shown with numbers, the first layer would be 1, then the second layer would be 2 and the third layer would be 3, but the fourth layer would be 6. There would be a leap after every 3 layers, separating the entire tier into the 3 major stages, early, middle and late, respectively. With this kind of representation, the advantage of 5 elements origin nuclei was obviously without compare. No, the 5 element origin nuclei have also achieved a perfect balance as they are mutually interdependent, thus the power they can generate would definitely not be just 5, but 6 times, or even 10 times stronger. Should I reach the peak of the first layer of element gathering tier, I'd at least be able to fight on equal footing with someone in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. How much power would I actually have? I'll have to reach the peak of the first layer of element gathering tier to find out. So this was the true power of an immortal grade spirit base. However, to simultaneously expand and strengthen 5 origin nuclei would definitely be much slower than expanding just 1, so the advantage of cultivation speed of an immortal grade spirit base was thus evened out. Moreover, to be able to discharge origin power at 5 times the speed would require for the space within his dantian to be simply colossal. Otherwise, he would only have the opportunity to make a few moves before exhausting all of the energy stored in his body, so how could he continue to play like this? Never mind if there's no advantage of fast cultivation speed. After all, I would obtain power that would make me practically invincible amongst all those within the same cultivation level in exchange for it. Moreover, I am the Alchemy Emperor, so I'll still be able to maintain a high speed of cultivation and progress through the tiers. Even if I can only reach Heaven tier by 200 years old again, that'd still be the fastest record in history. No, I already have a complete understanding and comprehension of the different tiers, so I definitely would not need as long as 200 years to break through to Heaven tier. The world is fair. To be able to obtain stronger power, one must make twice, or even 10 times the sacrifice. Moreover, the space within my Dantian is still too small, so I still do not have the ability to battle for too long. According to my understanding, only those spirit bases that have multiple elemental alignments that are also perfectly balanced can be labeled as an immortal grade spirit base. However, immortal grade spirit bases can also be separated into various categories, and my 5 elements mixed Chaos Lotus is the strongest. That's because there cannot be a spirit base with 6 elemental alignments in this world, as it would then be impossible to achieve a balance between the various elemental alignments. No wonder I had a strange feeling when I previously read the second layer of this 5 elements heaven grade skill. I had initially thought that the creator of this skill arts had made some kind of a mistake, but now it seems that this is because the 5 elements mixed Chaos Lotus is able to form 5 elements origin nuclei. If it's the simultaneous circulation of the 5 origin nuclei, there are no problems with this skill arts. So, it seems that an immortal grade spirit base definitely needs a specific kind of skill arts to be able to release its full prowess. Otherwise, if I were to use an ordinary skill arts to stimulate the 5 elements origin nuclei, I really have no idea what would happen. It seems that in this life, all my conditions are the best. If I still can't shatter the void and become a god with all those advantages, then I really should find a piece of tofu and knock myself to death with it. Taking advantage of the fact that the medicinal effects have not been completely exhausted, I'll cultivate for a while longer. Ling Han guided the remnants of the medicinal effects from the green spiritual fruit to expand his Dantian and strengthen his origin nuclei. The cultivation process of element gathering tier was to expand one's Dantian and strengthen the origin nucleus as much as possible. The larger the Dantian, the more origin power it could store and accumulate. Meanwhile, the larger the origin nucleus and the faster its rotation, the stronger the power that could instantly erupt from it would be. Thus, even if 2 martial artists possessed the same cultivation levels, there would still appear a large gap between their individual battle prowess. Of course, the number of origin nuclei also had to be taken into consideration now. Ling Han was like an excavator, enlarging his Dantian to enable it to store even more origin power and stimulating the rotation of his origin nuclei at the same time. With every rotation, the speed would increase by just that little bit more, and as strands of origin power twined around the origin nuclei would also become larger in size. He had to be very cautious when strengthening the origin nuclei in his Dantian, because there needed to be an absolute balance amongst the 5 origin nuclei. Otherwise, if there was even the slightest bit of difference, this balance would collapse. The earlier the stage, the more there could not be any minuscule bit of difference, for the foundation was still much too weak. Because of his thirst for power, Ling Han diligently continued to cultivate with utmost concentration. What? While he had been energetically excavating, he suddenly stopped, and an inconceivable expression appeared on his face. A black tower was drifting within his Dantian, exuding a golden light that stirred slightly. It gave off a desolate, primitive air, ancient and dignified. There were 9 levels in this tower, and from the angle of Ling Han's mind's sight, this black tower had a height of 10,000 meters, connecting the heavens and the earth. Even though it had already been 10,000 years, Ling Han could still identify this black tower with one glance. In his words, even if this tower had been burned to ashes, he'd still be able to identify it. Because this black tower was the culprit that had killed him in his last life. Curses, how could this tower be inside his Dantian? Could it be that killing him once in his last life was not enough, so it had chased after him to this second life, planning to kill him a second time? You can't play the game like that. Chapter 34. Chapter 34, Reappearance of the Black Tower. In his last life, after overcoming many dangerous obstacles, Ling Han finally entered the black light ground valley, whereupon he discovered a mysterious black tower. There was a golden script engraved on the walls of the tower, which was the indestructible heaven scroll. That had been Ling Han's biggest opportunity, yet it was also the largest crisis in his last life. With a shake of the black tower, his physical body was directly shattered into ashes. For some reason, his soul had survived and passed through 10,000 years into the current time period. Now looking upon this black tower, even with his strong mentality of a warrior of heaven tier, he still could not help but feel scared for a moment. In his last life, this black tower had only shook a little, and he was shattered into ashes. Now that it had reappeared within his body, how could this not be terrifying? However, Ling Han very quickly regained his composure. If the black tower intended to kill him a second time, then it could have done so long ago, although he had only just discovered the existence of the black tower within his dantian. This thing should have actually been there for a very long time. And now that he thought about it carefully, this might clear away some of the confusion that he had. For example, why was it that his soul had existed for about 10,000 years? It must have been because of the Black Tower. The reason for his sudden rebirth must also be related to the Black Tower using some kind of unknown method to allow him to be reborn. The Black Tower also conveniently followed him into this new life. "Brother, should I thank you or hate you?" "Huh!" Ling Han murmured. Because of the Black Tower, his last life was ended prematurely, but to be honest, even if he had not been shattered to death by the Black Tower, with a short 1,000 years' time, how would he be able to learn the indestructible Heaven Scroll? It was completely impossible. Because even when he had neither eaten nor slept, spending all his time on his studies of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, he still needed to spend 10,000 years' time. If it was under normal conditions, how would he be able to accomplish that? Now, he even had a feeling that the Black Tower had actually shattered him into ashes to help him and allow him to comprehend the indestructible Heaven Scroll in soul form. Thus he was reborn the moment he had finally grasped the Heaven Scroll's first layer. Otherwise, how could there be such a huge coincidence in this world? The Black Tower, as it had been in the past, still possessed 9 floors, and aside from the lowest floor having a tightly closed door, the other floors were all completely sealed, without a single window or any other entrance. Even with Ling Han's sight, he still could not identify the material used to construct this Black Tower. All he could sense from it was an icy, weathered ancient air. Additionally, Ling Han had never heard that the Dantian could accommodate anything else other than origin power. This Black Tower was definitely not of this world. There was a 99% chance that the Black Tower originated from the Divine Plane, and so did the indestructible Heaven Scroll engraved on its walls. A cultivation technique that required 10,000 years to be comprehended naturally could not possibly belong to this mortal plane either. Ling Han wanted to use his consciousness to enter the Black Tower, but discovered it was impossible. Even if consciousness was a power without form, and thus should be able to find its way anywhere, there was not even a small pinhole in this Black Tower through which his mental consciousness could enter. He wanted to force his way through the door, but when he directed his mental consciousness to rush towards the door, it was immediately rebounded back. Fine, this was a master. In his last life, it erased his existence with a casual tremor, and now, its overbearing presence was occupying his dantian while he not only couldn't do anything to it, but also had completely no idea what kind of existence this Black Tower actually was. He was unwilling to give up, and once again commanded his consciousness to attack the Black Tower. No matter what, he had to find something out. After a few times of barraging his mental powers over and over against the tower, it seemed like the Black Tower had somewhat lost patience with him. It actually gave a slight tremor. There was finally a reaction, and a flash of consciousness was transmitted out by the Black Tower. This exceeded the level of simple language, and allowed Ling Han to directly understand its meaning. The general idea transmitted by the Black Tower was, "The current you is still too weak, and cannot possibly enter the Black Tower. You'd have to at least break through to the gushing spring tier. But as the new master of the Black Tower, every time you progress to the next tier, you'll be able to obtain a single blessing from the Black Tower to directly raise your power by 1 tier. For example, as per Ling Han's current cultivation level of the early period of the first layer of element gathering tier, with the blessing of the Black Tower, he'd be able to display the power of someone in the first layer of gushing spring tier. However, it was only a one-time blessing. Even if he didn't use it, it'd be wasted, and couldn't be accumulated. Master? He had actually become the master of the Black Tower? However, this Black Tower really was a master. After all, if he was its master, why was it that he could not make use of it at all? Moreover, for every tier he ascended to, he could only get a one-time blessing from the Black Tower. Looks like he'd have to break through to the gushing spring tier to be able to find out more. Still, this could become his trump card. To instantly raise his power by 1 tier, this trump card was more than enough to let him turn the tables in a moment of danger. But he could only use this kind of trump card once every time he ascended to the next tier. The tower was really much too stingy. Ling Han could not help exhaling a sigh before opening his eyes, looking very sullen. Lu Yutong almost felt like crying at this. You managed to break through to the element gathering tier in 1 day, and yet you still look so disappointed. How could this be endured by others? Come on, let's go home! Ling Han gave a snap of his fingers. This was the first time he had experienced the warmth of a father's love, and now that he has been away from home for close to a month, he felt a bit homesick. The two of them then began their journey home. On the way, Ling Han went through the second layer of cultivation techniques of the 5 elements heaven-grade skill inside his head. With his high perception, naturally he experienced no trouble and fully grasped every little detail of the second layer. There were 9 layers in total in the 5 elements heaven-grade skill, corresponding with a martial artist's cultivation level from body refining tier all the way to heaven tier. Every breakthrough would mean that there should be a change to the corresponding cultivation technique suited to that cultivation level. Element gathering tier was indeed something else. Origin power gushed out from his dantian. The amount was at least 10 times that of the 9th layer of body refining tier. Origin power continuously flooded out from his dantian as if there was no end to it. When they had departed, they had spent about less than half a day's time to arrive at their destination, but their return journey only lasted about an hour. Very soon, Grey Cloud Town appeared in front of their eyes. "Greetings, young Master Han! Greetings, young Master Han!" From the moment they stepped into the Ling clan residence, all servants and guards greeted Ling Han respectfully. Everyone now knew that Ling Han had defeated the Qing brothers, and thus naturally would not dare to be disrespectful to this young master previously well known as trash anymore. After asking around, Ling Han found out that his father was currently inside his study, and quickly ran there. Ling Dongxing had said before that as long as he managed to break through to the element gathering tier, he would tell him what had happened to his mother. He entered the yard, and soon arrived at the door to the study. The door was ajar, and he gave a soft cough before entering, and said, "Father, I've returned." "Haha, you returned just in time. Tonight the Qing clan is hosting a banquet, and your name is also on the invitation." Ling Dongxing gave a hearty laugh, raising his head to look at Ling Han while holding out an invitation. Ling Han took the invitation, scanned through it, then said with a smile, "The Qing clan can't hold on any longer?" Ling Dongxing had long started his counterattack against the Qing clan. When Ma Dejun cut off the supply of alchemical medicine to the Qing clan was like a normal human being who had lost a leg. Their every step was a trial. Additionally, the Ling clan was also attacking the other business ventures of the Qing clan, paying a high price to purchase the medicinal ingredients that were supposed to be sold to the Qing clan and selling them at low prices. In this manner, the finances of the Qing clan were completely paralyzed, just as how the finances of the Ling clan had been. 20+ days of this, and the Qing clan was now trapped in a big dilemma. At this time, the Qing clan actually sent them an invitation to a banquet they were hosting. This was most likely a plea for mercy. Later, the two of us will attend the banquet. But be careful, and don't run around at the banquet. I'm worried that the Qing clan may be desperate enough to set up a trap," Ling Dongxing said. He would, of course, not brave the danger alone. The elite members of the clan would also be attending along him to act as a deterrence in case the Qing clan was thinking of committing violence. Ling Dongxing looked at Ling Han, slightly frowning. He felt as if something was not right, but exactly what that something was, he could not think of. Pa! After half a moment, he suddenly smacked the table, and jumped up from his seat, his whole face filled with excitement, and said, "Honor you, you've broken through to element gathering tier." He finally discovered what that weird feeling he had was. Ling Han nodded and said with a smile, "I have." "Good. Good. Good." Ling Dongxing looked very excited, his hands clenched into fists. Because he had exerted too much strength into it, the bones in his fingers made a grinding sound, and the veins on his hands were protruding. "Father, I want to know about Mother," Ling Han said deeply. Ling Dongxing was hesitant for a while, before nodding his head and saying, "The current you does have the right to know. I had originally thought that the matter about your mother would be hidden in my heart for the rest of my life. I've hidden it for too long, so long that my heart is also very bitter." Ling Han nodded lightly. All these years, Ling Dongxing had borne the pain of losing his beloved wife alone. There was no one to comfort him, nor was there anyone to shoulder this pain with him, so he naturally suffered a lot. Ling Han swore in his heart that no matter who it was that had forced his parents to separate, he would ensure that this culprit would pay the price for this crime. Chapter 35. Chapter 35 Ao Feng. Years ago, I too was considered to be one of the geniuses of Rain Country. I was in the prime of my youth, filled with longing for the outside world. After I broke through to the element gathering tier, I left my home to find my own way in the world. 18 years ago, I was searching for an antique relic in Dark Demon Forest, when I accidentally encountered your mother. As Ling Dongxing thought back to his past, his steadfast face could not help revealing a sliver of tenderness, especially when he started to speak of Ling Han's mother. "Your mother's name is Yu Hongchang. She was a very beautiful and very gentle woman." Ling Dongxing spoke in a murmur, and his gaze became extremely gentle. "However, the first time we met, we had a slight misunderstanding, and ended up fighting with each other. After that, we started journeying together, and built up a strong, deep affection for one another. When your mother was pregnant with you, we decided to return to Grey Cloud Town, and at that moment, I found out that your mother came from a remarkable background. She was the great-granddaughter of the third elder of Winter Moon's sect. The sect master of Winter Moon's sect was a powerful warrior of the pinnacle of spiritual infant tier. The elders were all in the spiritual infant tier as well. Should any one of them appear, they would be able to easily obliterate our Rain Country. Your mother's elders intended to marry her off to the descendant of another elder of the sect, a man named Ao Feng. He was extremely talented in martial arts, so talented that his talent could be claimed to be in defiance of the natural order. However, he was a philandering character. There were hundreds of women around him, and he even had many sons and daughters born out of wedlock. Your mother naturally did not wish to marry such a man, so she left home to get away from her worries, after which she met me, got to know me, and entered into a relationship with me. But eventually the Winter Moon sect still discovered your mother's relationship with me, and dispatched elite warriors to capture us. We kept fleeing, and a short while after you were born, your mother's older brother, Yujin Shan, and Ao Feng managed to catch up to us. I will never forget what Ao Feng did to me at that time. He broke all my fingers one by one in order to force me to say traitorous words about your mother. However, he was disappointed. Even if I die, how could I ever do anything to hurt Hongchang? Your mother threatened them by saying that she would end her own life, and with that, managed to guarantee the safety of us father and son, but my spirit base was crippled by Ao Feng. At first, I was of a mind to storm to the Winter Moon sect and battle to the death, but for your sake, I decided to live out a contemptible life, and so returned to Grey Cloud Town. Ling Han suddenly understood. No wonder Ling Dongxing could easily enter and leave the purple light ground valley which even elite warriors from Huyang Academy did not manage to enter. His mother must have left some kind of secret treasure with his father that could ensure his survival years ago. Spiritual infant tier. Ling Han lightly frowned. It looks like he would not be able to retrieve his mother in the short term. There were 10 tiers in martial arts, and the spiritual infant tier was the 7th tier. Meanwhile, he had only just stepped onto the 2nd tier, so no matter how he looked at it, it'd take him about 10, 20 years or even more before he managed to achieve the 7th tier. And this was still what he, with his comprehension of the tiers up to heaven tier, an immortal grade spirit base, a heaven grade cultivation technique, and the support of his knowledge as the Alchemy Emperor, could achieve. If it was any other genius, even if they managed to enter the spiritual infant tier within their lifetime, it would still be something that could only be possible after at least 200 or 300 years' time. He had to make full use of his time. That's because there was a limit to the lifespan of a martial artist. If a martial artist did not break through to the flower blossom tier, they would enjoy a lifespan no longer than that of a mortal. At best, he would have no pains or illnesses and manage to survive to 100 years old. But should he be able to break through to flower blossom tier, then he'd be able to gain an extra 200 years of lifespan, and breaking through to every subsequent tier would reward the martial with another additional 200 years of lifespan. Ao Feng! Flames of rage burned strongly in Ling Han's eyes. Although Ling Dongxing had played down what he experienced, Ling Han could imagine how much his father had suffered in the hands of Ao Feng on that day, and how much humiliation he had gone through for all his dignity to be lost. If it was not for his sake, Ling Dongxing would definitely have stormed the Winter Moon sect. At worst, he would die. An insult to the father was the same as insulting the son. Ling Han had already sentenced Ao Feng to death penalty within his heart. However, as Ao Feng was a disciple of the Winter Moon sect, and was even labeled a genius existence, what would his current cultivation level be? Spiritual ocean? Spiritual pedestal? Flower blossom? Honor, although you are very talented, the Winter Moon sect is still a colossal existence to the two of us. You must not act impulsively. Otherwise, I really will not be able to face your mother anymore, Ling Dongxing said after regaining his composure. Ling Han nodded and said, Please don't worry, father. I will definitely not act impulsively. All my hopes are now on your shoulders. You are not only living for the sake of yourself, but also for the sake of your mother, Ling Dongxing said deeply. I understand. Right, now that you have broken through to the element gathering tier, you can participate in the Deyuan tournament, Ling Dongxing said, changing the subject. Deyuan tournament? Ling Han searched through the memories in his head, and discovered that he did not have any relevant memories regarding this tournament. Ling Dongxing smiled and said, You had never shown such talent in the field of martial arts before, and so I never spoke of it to you. This Deyuan tournament is a martial arts tournament organized by the Deyuan King's Mansion. It takes place once every 3 years. The requirements for the participants are below 30 years old, cultivation level under Gushing Spring tier, and being a martial artist that belongs within the sphere of control of Deyuan City. In Rain Country, cities were the largest administrative area, and there were 36 great cities all over the country. Every city was responsible for an expansive area. Deyuan City was one of these 36 cities, and the one in charge of this city was called the Deyuan King. He was also a descendant of the founding emperor of Rain Country, as the title of Deyuan City's lord and Deyuan King was passed down through the generations. Under the control of the Deyuan King's mansion were 4 great powers, which were in charge of their own respective barren areas aside from Deyuan City itself. Stone Wolf Sect was one of them. What kind of reward will the champion get? Ling Han asked. Ling Dongxing could not help feeling a little scorn. His son was really quite ambitious to immediately and directly aim for the position of champion. However, this was his excellent son. He thought for a while and said, It's apparently some kind of spiritual medicine called dark moon grass. It's the chief ingredient for concocting purple origin pill, which can help a martial artist in the element gathering tier easily break through to the gushing spring tier. Ling Han was immediately flabbergasted. The alchemists now. Were they all idiots? Dark moon grass is of such high value. How could it be used to concoct a yellow-grade high-level pill? It was the chief ingredient for concocting this spatial pill. The spatial pill could help expand the space within the dantian of a martial artist, and this was something even elite warriors of heaven tier would be deeply jealous of. Such a natural spiritual medicine naturally could let a martial artist in the element gathering tier break through easily and successfully to the gushing spring tier. Its grade was so high that it'd be strange if it did not have this kind of effect. But how wasteful was that? The chief ingredient of purple origin pill could be easily replaced with a lower grade medicinal ingredient. 10,000 years had passed. Could it be that there was not even the slightest bit of improvement to alchemy, and alchemy had degraded instead? Ling Han broke out in a smile. He could not allow such a precious spiritual medicine to be wasted, so he could only take the dark moon grass. Moreover, his 5 elements origin nuclei expended too much origin power at too fast a pace, and he was just worrying about the limited space within his dantian. And here, the solution came knocking on his door. Still, it was already the end of October now, and there were only about 2 months left before the end of the year, so it did seem to be a bit pressing. Looks like he would have to make a trip to the 7 Wind Mountains, as the inner core of the red-scaled dragon snake could be used to concoct the transcending origin pill. A transcending origin pill would allow the cultivation level of a martial artist in the element gathering tier to forcibly increase by 1 layer, but it was only effective for martial artists in the early stage of element gathering tier. For Ling Han, if he wanted to reach the middle stage of element gathering tier before the year's end, then the transcending origin pill was his only option. However, the red-scaled dragon snake was extraordinarily powerful, and its whole body was strongly poisonous. Thus Ling Han needed to make full preparations for this trip. Otherwise, it would be the same as throwing away his life. Chapter 36. Chapter 36, King of Eternal Night. Father is not trying to attack your self-confidence here, but for every round of the Yuan tournament, within the ranks of the participants, there is no lack of powerful warriors in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, and you've just entered the element gathering tier. No matter how extraordinarily gifted you may be, you are still unable to compare with elite warriors in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. Ling Dongxing switched the topic of conversation to advise Ling Han. It's good to have great ambition, but overconfidence was definitely nothing good. Ling Han nodded. Every layer of martial arts was a stage, and every 3 layers was a large stage. There were very few geniuses that could manage to step over this stage, and defeat those with higher cultivation levels than their own. He was now only in the 1st layer of element gathering tier. How far was his power from that of the 9th layer of element gathering tier? Moreover, there were some who had broken through to the 9th layer of element gathering tier long ago, and although they had not yet broken through to the gushing spring tier, they could still master their martial arts skills to a higher, stronger level. These warriors would naturally have battle strength that was on a completely different level. If he had reached the peak of the 1st layer of element gathering tier, then with the power of the 5 elements origin nuclei, he'd have a high chance of winning even against someone in the middle stage of element gathering tier. But if his opponent was in the late stage of element gathering tier, the chance of Ling Han winning would only be 50-50. After a while, I plan to head to the 7 Wind Mountains for training, Ling Han said. Although he had made this decision some time ago, there was still a need to inform Ling Dongxing of it. Ling Dongxing was instantly shocked. He naturally knew what kind of place the 7 Wind Mountains was. It was a world where demonic beasts rampaged, and there were extremely fearful creatures within the innermost parts of the forest. Thus, even martial artists in spiritual ocean tier dared not venture too deeply. Ling Han was only in the 1st layer of element gathering tier. It was too dangerous for him to enter the 7 Wind Mountains. Besides, there were just 2 months left until the year's end, so even if he went there for a training trip, it wouldn't be possible for him to make much progress anyways. Please don't worry, Father. I will only travel around the outer zone, and won't venture too deeply in, Ling Han said, smiling. He truly had no such intention, for the martial artist who had discovered the earth dragon grass was also only in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. He too could not have ventured deeply into the 7 Wind Mountains. Still, Ling Dongxing could not help but worry. However, He also understood that his son was now a grown-up man, so it was impossible that he would listen to his father on every issue. Thus, he had only given him repeated instructions and advice. Fortunately, Ling Han was not planning to immediately set out for the Seven Wind Mountains. Father and son conversed a moment longer about their daily lives before Ling Han returned to his room, where he took a bath to wash away the dust accumulated during his travel. He took out and changed into a new suit of clothes, though he felt it was a little tight. He was still in the growing period, and within this month of traveling in the wilds, he not only grew taller, but his physique had also become much sturdier. Thus, when he wore the clothes he had worn in the past, he suddenly felt as if the clothes had shrunk a size. Thankfully, the Ling clan had no lack of money, so Ling Han called for a servant to take his measurements, and immediately head to the tailor's to collect some ready-made clothes for him to choose from. But when he spotted Lu Yutong, he could not help once again calling for a servant. Then, he had Lu Yutong announce her measurements as well, so that the servant could collect some clothes for her too. This beautiful little attendant girl would naturally be attending tonight's banquet with him. Very soon, the servant returned with a pile of clothing. There were more than 10 sets of both male and female attire, and Ling Han and Lu Yutong slowly browsed through them. Ling Han very quickly made his choice, but Lu Yutong tried one suit after another. She appeared not to be too satisfied with the suits, yet also seemed to have much interest in every one of them. Lu Yutong finally made her decision right about when the sun was about to set. After she had changed, Ling Han could not help giving a whistle. Truly beautiful. She was already an exquisitely beautiful girl. Now that she had changed into a long, lake water green dress, her delicate, well-shaped figure was on full display. Her round breasts, slender waist, slightly uplifted behind, together with a pair of shapely long legs, formed an image of complete femininity. She had even deliberately put on some light makeup, allowing her facial features to be even more distinctly displayed. She really did make a tempting picture. Seeing Ling Han's slightly shocked expression, Lu Yutong could not help feeling a little proud. All this while, she had experienced a lot of shock because of Ling Han, and now that she had finally given him a little payback, she felt very pleased, so much that even the corners of her lips had lifted up in a smile. She was originally an icy beauty. Now, with a smile on her face, it seemed as if the ice had melted and she looked truly lovely and alluring, elegant and graceful. Even Ling Han, with his firm composure, could not help staring. "Let's go!" Lu Yutong slightly raised her jade-like chin, creating an attractive arch, making her look a little arrogant. Beauties will be beauties, every move and action would make an observer carefree and pleased. But when they exited the residence, Lu Yutong still had her beautiful face veiled, and carefully hid her alluring features behind the veil. Ling Han secretly felt this was a bit of a pity, yet at the same time, he felt a little pleased too, for the beautiful face of his little attendant girl could only be admired by him alone. "Oh right, do you know of any prominent geniuses in Deyuan City?" Ling Han asked, while they were walking. Lu Yutong's steps paused, and she said, "Are you intending to participate in the Deyuan tournament? You're quite smart." Ling Han smiled. Rain Country has a nationwide great tournament that is held once every 3 years. If you manage to get into the top 50 in the Deyuan tournament, then you're guaranteed enrollment within Huyang Academy, Lu Yutong said. This was originally meant to discover geniuses for Rain Country. So that's how it is, Deyuan City was not the only example. If you're talking about geniuses, Lu Yutong pondered for a moment, lightly opened her mouth, and spoke. The Imperial City is too far away from here, so I'm not really sure. I only know of one person, because he is also a student of Huyang Academy. And who's that? Ling Han asked casually. Qi Yongyi, the 4th son of the current Deyuan king. Others gave him the nickname, King of Eternal Night. He truly is extremely talented, with exceedingly high battle strength. When he was in the 6th layer of Element Gathering Tier, he had once killed a warrior in the 8th layer of Element Gathering Tier. Lu Yutong did not hide her expression of admiration. Killing and defeating were 2 different matters after all. 3 years ago, he was in the 6th layer of Element Gathering Tier, and he had already gotten the second place in the Deyuan tournament. Now, he should already be in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. This truly was an extremely powerful opponent. Ling Han's battle spirit uplifted. It would be invigorating to trample such a strong opponent. The two of them rendezvoused with Ling Dongxing, and the company of 3 boarded a carriage that set out from the Ling clan residence. Meanwhile, closely following behind them were Ling Zhongquan and his grandson, who had also boarded a carriage of their own. "Father, you still haven't dealt with them?" Ling Han asked. "When all is said and done, Ling Zhongquan is still the chief butler. Moreover, he has been running things for so many years that his power is deeply rooted. Although I've managed to remove some of his power, he's not someone I can deal with in a short period of time." Ling Dongxing frowned, looking slightly displeased. This pair of grandfather and grandson actually dared to try to steal the opportunity to enroll in Huyan Academy he had earned for his son. They were truly despicable. Ling Han nodded. In the end, it was still the issue of actual power. If Ling Dongxing was in the Gushing Spring tier, then no matter how bold Ling Zhongquan was, he would not dare have any wild thoughts. The carriage swayed slightly on the way, and after about 20 minutes, they had arrived at the main door to the Qing clan residence. The Qing clan was the other great clan of Grey Cloud Town, so naturally their mansion was not something that common people's real estate could compare to. It occupied a space of a few tens of acres, the high walls of the mansion towering like a giant, creeping beast. Not only the Ling clan was invited to the banquet tonight, for all clans that were even slightly powerful within Grey Cloud Town had all received invitations. Thus, the Qing clan had already spread out a red carpet at their main entrance, with 8 servants standing on either side. Every time a guest arrived, these servants would announce their arrival loudly and clearly, and naturally, there would be someone to come out from the residence to receive the guest. When Ling Han and his companions stepped down from their carriage, immediately, a servant announced loudly, "Noble guest has arrived! Haha, Brother Ling, I've waited a long time for you." A middle-aged man stepped out to receive them, raising his clasped hands in the direction of Ling Dongxing. His face was redder than dates, and his figure tall and sturdy. He was the Qing clan head, Cheng Wenqun. Chapter 37. Chapter 37. The Plans of the Qing Clan. "Brother Cheng!" Ling Dongxing immediately plastered a smile on his face, raising his clasped hands towards Cheng Wenqun in greeting. Come, you're the guest of honor today. I was worried you wouldn't be coming." Cheng Wenqun tugged on Ling Dongxing's arm, presenting an image of cordiality and enthusiasm. "This is Brother Cheng's banquet, how could I not give face to you?" Ling Dongxing laughed loudly. The two of them exchanged words, looking for all the world like a pair of old buddies. Those who didn't know the story would definitely not think that they were arch-enemies. Either of them wanted nothing more than to see the other dead. Ling Han gave a shrug. He had an utmost dislike for this kind of false politeness. Thankfully, in his last life, he was a genius of alchemy, thus there were only those who would flatter and curry favor with him, and there was no need for him to do the same with anyone. Cheng Wenqun didn't even glance at Ling Han, as if he did not know that this was the person that had injured his 2 sons, and also the culprit behind the economic war between the 2 clans. "Honor, don't go too far," Ling Dongxing instructed. "Yes, father," Ling Han answered and followed him with Liu Tong in tow. Under the guidance of Cheng Wenqun, they arrived very quickly at the main hall, where there were about 100 banquet tables. At the moment, there were quite many who were already seated. As there was a name written on every banquet table, an incident of sitting at the wrong table would not happen easily. The one who had made the arrangements for the main hall was a very attentive person, as he had considered the fact that some guests may arrive with female companions. As a result, although there was space for 10 people at every banquet table, there would only be about 5 names written on each. After Ling Han and Liu Tong found their table, they took their seats. "Young Master Han!" There were already 3 others seated at this banquet table. They all greeted Ling Han, their faces filled with respect. They were all young people, and also students of Grey Cloud Academy. Not too long ago, They had all witnessed Ling Han display his invincible might and defeat Qing Xiang and his brother, plus they've also heard the fact that he was in the 7th layer of body refining tier. Thus, they naturally dared not to display the slightest bit of contempt. A 16-year-old in the 7th layer of body refining tier. In Grey Cloud Town, this kind of individual would more than deserve the name of genius. Ling Han smiled in response. After all, they were giving him face, so naturally, there was no reason for him to give them the cold shoulder. After a short while, Ling Muyun too took his seat at this table, and while he looked as if he had not seen Ling Han at all, his whole face was stiff. After another short while, Qing Xiang walked over and also took a seat at this particular table. Ling Han, you're not looking too bad. Qing Xiang smiled coldly at Ling Han. Ling Han gave him a look over and said, "Hee, the injuries on your face seem to have recovered quite quickly." Qing Xiang's face reddened instantly. He considered the fact that he had been publicly defeated by Ling Han a great dishonor. Moreover, he was even forced to beg for mercy. Every time he recalled the incident, he wanted to commit suicide. However, after today, he would be able to completely erase this blemish on his honor and regain his pride. "You can only have this short while to be pleased with yourself," he said, coldly smiling. "Later, you will be kneeling in front of me to beg for my forgiveness. Have you not taken your medicine? Or have you had an overdose?" Ling Han said, smiling. Qing Xiang did not say anything more, but the corners of his lips lifted up slightly, forming a mysterious smile. The number of guests quickly increased. At first, most of the guests were still freely walking around. After all, this kind of banquet was also a good chance to endear yourself to your betters and to discuss business. But as more and more guests arrived, most sat down in their respective seats to wait for the banquet to begin. The hostile relationship of the Ling clan with the Qing clan was observed by all. They were the two greatest parties in Grey Cloud Town. If Qing clan decided to yield to Ling Han now, then after this, the Ling clan would become the most dominant party in Grey Cloud Town. As a result, there were many guests attending the banquet tonight. They were all here to witness a possibly historical moment. Very soon, Chung Wen-kun stood up and waved his hands in various directions, signifying that he had something to say. Most of the guests who had been whispering to each other also ceased their respective conversations, and the main hall became extremely quiet. Was he going to admit defeat to the Ling clan in public? "The reason why I've invited all of you tonight here is to introduce someone to you," Chung Wen-kun began. As these words were heard, all those present put on blank expressions. What was going on here? Wasn't the Qing clan supposed to be admitting defeat to the Ling clan? How did this become someone's reception banquet? If they had known earlier, most of the guests would not have attended this banquet. Shua! The attention of the guests all switched focus to Ling Dongxing. Now that the Qing clan has made such a move, then the one bearing the brunt of it would naturally be this clan head of the Ling clan. They wanted to see how he would react. But what invoked disappointment of most of the guests was the fact that Ling Dongxing's face still maintained a serene smile, as if he couldn't care less. Cheng Wen-kun continued to speak. "This person would be my nephew, Qing Xiaoyuan, who left the clan at 13 years old to become the disciple of one of the elders of Stone Wolf sect. Now that he has become slightly skilled, he has returned for a family visit." Stone Wolf sect. All present experienced shock. The Stone Wolf sect was the overlord within the surrounding 1,000 miles, and held ultimate power over tens of towns, including Grey Cloud Town. They could be considered the ultimate local tyrant. Qing Wen-kun suddenly revealing this hidden card obviously meant that he had no plan to admit defeat to the Ling clan. Instead, he was planning to use the Stone Wolf sect to suppress the Ling clan. However, no matter how it was, Qing Xiaoyuan was just a disciple of one of the elders of Stone Wolf sect, so his ability should be quite limited, right? Xiaoyuan has also very fortunately invited a very respected, noble guest. Qing Wen-kun was all smiles. This was his real trump card. "Let us welcome Chen Feng Lai, Elder Chen." Elder? An elder of Stone Wolf sect? That was a powerful existence in Gushing Spring Tier. Qing Wenkun took the lead in clapping his hands in welcome, and consecutively, the other guests all joined in the applause. At this moment, an old man walked out of the living room and appeared in their midst. He had a medium-sized figure, and was clad completely in vermilion. He had a full head of black hair and a rosy complexion that shone with a strange glow. Behind the old man closely followed a young man, who had his hands held at his sides and brow lowered, presenting an image of utmost respect. Without doubt, this old man must be Qin Fenglai, while the young man should be Qing Xiaoyuan. Qin Fenglai strode towards the host's table and, as if there wasn't anyone else around him, took his seat, appearing extremely arrogant. But no one dared to express disapproval towards this kind of attitude from him, because he was a powerful warrior in Gushing Spring Tier. Even if the man was only in the first layer of Gushing Spring Tier, he'd be able to easily dominate a person in the 9th layer of Element Gathering Tier. This was the ironclad rule of martial arts. He did not speak a single word the whole while. In his eyes, this was the natural order of events. There was absolutely no one here that deserved to speak to him. Had Qing Xiaoyuan not begged and pleaded with him for many days, he would not even deign to show his face at such a setting. Qing Wenkun directed a self-satisfied glance at Ling Dongxing. His meaning was more or less, "I've even managed to invite an elder from the Stone Wolf sect here, and you still dare to oppose me?" Qing Xiaoyuan did not sit with Qin Fenglai at the host's table. Instead, he made his way to sit next to Qing Xiang grandly. This guy was in the Element Gathering Tier. He should not have broken through too long ago, as he was still in the first layer of Element Gathering Tier. "Young brother Xiang, I heard you had a spar with someone some days ago and lost?" Qing Xiaoyuan asked Qing Xiang. "I was less skilled than my opponent AI." Qing Xiang gave a deliberate sigh. "Oh?" Qing Xiaoyuan rose a brow and said, "Who did you lose to? I would like to take a look at this person. He's seemingly far away, but actually close at hand." Qing Xiang's gaze turned towards Ling Han. "So you lost to this young genius?" Qing Xiaoyuan smiled coldly, also looking at Ling Han, and said in challenge, "Do you dare to have a spar with me?" Chapter 38. Chapter 38. Battling Qing Xiaoyuan. This pair of cousins continued their pleasant banter. How could the others not see that this was a deliberate challenge aimed at Ling Han? The corners of Qing Xiang's lips slightly lifted, and said loftily, "I forgot to mention, this cousin of mine just broke through to the Element Gathering Tier last year, and now he's about to achieve the peak of the first layer of Element Gathering Tier. It could even be said that he's an exceptional genius." Meanwhile, Qing Xiaoyuan smiled modestly and said, "I only broke through to the Element Gathering Tier at 20 years old, so I can't really be considered any kind of exceptional genius. I am only one step ahead of most people." When they heard him say this, the others seated at the banquet table all held shocked expressions. Element Gathering Tier. Although Qing Xiang was in the 9th layer of Body Refining Tier and was only 19 years old, to advance such a big step forward would need at least 3-5 years, or it may not even be achieved in a lifetime. Thus, Qing Xiaoyuan was being overly modest. Someone who broke through to the Element Gathering Tier at 20 years old definitely deserved the name of a genius. Of course, the praise of exceptional genius was a bit of an exaggeration. After all, Grey Cloud Town was still too small a place, so any person who displayed a slight bit of outstanding talent would be named as genius. The common knowledge of martial arts was that difference of tiers was a gap that was near impossible to breach during fight. Everyone looked at Ling Han, wondering how was this guy going to solve the predicament he was currently facing. If he accepted the challenge, then he would definitely lose. Qing Xiaoyuan may even kill him. With an elder from Stone Wolf sect present, what did he dare not do? But if he did not accept the challenge, then the reputation he had worked so hard to build up would collapse. He was trapped between a rock and a hard place. But if you compare the possible consequences of each decision, then one should understand that refusing the challenge was the wisest move to make. After all, accepting the challenge could possibly result in death. They wanted to shame him? Ling Han's gaze focused on Qing Xiang before switching to Qing Xiaoyuan, and he couldn't help the corners of his lips lifting up in a smile. This scheme was quite well planned, but the Qing clan would never have imagined that he had already advanced into element-gathering tier, as well as the fact that his 5-element origin nuclei gifted him with incomparable power. "All right, then let's spar for a bit," he said with a smile. "What?" Ling Han actually agreed. Not only did the others never think of such a thing happening, even Cheng Xiang and his cousin were shocked. But after a while, they both smiled coldly. Since this brat was looking for death, then let's give him a hand. If Ling Dongxing could not hold himself back from assisting his son, then Cheng Fenglai too would take action to kill him too. This was what they hoped would happen. The script for tonight's show was to find an excuse to eliminate both Ling Dongxing and Ling Han. Even Ling Mu Yun could barely conceal the elation he felt. He too wanted nothing more than for Ling Han to die. For clans of martial artists, spars during banquets were something quite common. They only needed to clear some space outside the living room, and there was a ready-made battleground. With the deliberate publicizing from Cheng Xiang, the news that Ling Han would be having a spar with Qing Xiaoyuan spread to every table. Additionally, the individual strength of the two fighters, or at least the battle prowess of Qing Xiaoyuan, was made known to everyone. This was a battle with a conclusion that held absolutely no suspense. Could it be that Ling Han was too proud and arrogant to refuse the challenge? The two fighters stepped into the courtyard outside the main hall. There was an empty space of about 10 meters cleared out here. Although it was not really very wide, it was more than enough for the upcoming battle. "You really are an idiot!" Qing Xiaoyuan smiled coldly, killing intent exuding from him. He purposely lowered his voice and said, "I will slaughter you!" "Oh?" Ling Han gave a snort. "You are really daydreaming. Then die!" Qing Xiaoyuan gave a loud laugh, his fist flying towards Ling Han. He had no need to use any kind of martial arts skill. He fully believed that, with the strength of a warrior at the peak of the first layer of element gathering tier, he would be able to easily crush Ling Han. There was a saying in martial arts which meant that enough strength would subdue 10 rounds of battle. Under the pretext that there was too great a gulf between two fighters' respective strengths, there was absolute no need for any kind of martial arts techniques. Ling Han held no fear as he too responded with a fist flying towards Qing Xiaoyuan. With everyone fixing their eyes on them, the two fists crashed into one another, and a powerful ripple suddenly erupted, radiating out in all directions. Pung 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 pung. A few of those who stood the closest suddenly collapsed. Meanwhile, Ling Han and Qing Xiaoyuan were still maintaining their previous stances, their two fists pushing against each other. What? Seeing such a scene, everyone was greatly shocked, their faces filled with utter disbelief. Some who had been eating immediately spat out what they had been eating, accidentally covering the faces of those who had been so unfortunate as to sit opposite. For a short moment, the scene was one of complete chaos. Ling Han actually countered Qing Xiaoyuan with a fist, and it even seemed like their power was evenly matched. How could this be possible? Qing Xiaoyuan's arrogant expression had completely disappeared as he said, deeply frowning, "Element gathering tier?" Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "You're not the only one who can break through." In truth, almost everyone had already guessed it, but when they heard Ling Han's confirmation, a new wave of shocked exclamations still emerged. Previously, when Qing Xiaoyuan broke through to the element gathering tier at 20 years old, he was already praised as an exceptional genius, yet now, Ling Han was only 16 years old. 16 years old and in the element gathering tier? Gods, this was crazy! Everyone turned gazes full of incomprehension towards Ling Han. This guy was a publicly acclaimed trash just more than a month ago. How did he, in such a short time, reverse his fortunes? Brother Ling, you truly have a wonderful son, Chen Wenkun said in an awe-inspiring tone, his voice failing to conceal his killing intent. A 16-year-old boy who had already achieved the element gathering tier was much too terrifying. He was even more talented than Ling Dongxing had been years ago. In the past, he had always compared himself with Ling Dongxing, but no matter how much effort he expended, the gulf between himself and Ling Dongxing only became wider and wider, until the moment when Ling Dongxing returned to Grey Cloud Town, his strength stagnated in the 9th layer of element-gathering tier. This was what finally gave him a chance to catch up to him. But he had never imagined that Ling Han's talent was even more prominent. He definitely could not allow this brat to live. Otherwise, perhaps in a few years' time, this brat could even possibly break through to Gushing Spring tier, and at that moment, the Qing clan could only bow beneath the might of the Ling clan. Ling Dongxing smiled faintly. In the past, his son had caused him much heartache, yet now, Ling Dongxing only felt immeasurably proud of him. He said, "Just SOSO, still can't compare to your clan's Xiao Yuan, who had already broken through a year ago. Damn it, how could a 20-year-old who broke through compare with a 16-year-old who broke through?" Within the courtyard, Cheng Xiaoyuan took a deep breath, yet his heart was filled with overwhelming shock. He had heard Qing Xiang mention before that Ling Han was only in the 7th layer of body refining tier just over a month ago, and yet he had astonishingly broken through to element gathering tier now. This progression rate was really much too horrifying. Could it be that this brat had some kind of treasure that allowed him to speed up his cultivation rate? When he thought about this, his eyes instantly lit up. It must be, this brat's reputation as a piece of trash was well known all over town, but he had, all of a sudden, turned so powerful. It must have been that he had obtained some kind of colossal opportunity. Well, it belongs to me now. Thinking of this, Qing Xiaoyuan opened up his fists, revealing his palms. He intended to use a martial arts technique. Earth-shaking palm, yellow grade high-level martial arts technique. This was a technique he had obtained when he had been on a training trip at a historical site. It not only allowed him to have an additional powerful secret art, but when he handed it over to the Stone Wolf sect, he had also been rewarded with a origin gathering pill, which helped him to break through to element gathering tier in one go. Otherwise, there was no way he would have been able to break through to element gathering tier when he was 20 years old. He was filled with confidence. A yellow grade high-level martial arts technique was considered top-rate even in Stone Wolf sect. The martial arts techniques that had been passed down through the Ling and Qing clans were only yellow grade medium-level martial arts techniques at best. He fully believed that once he used Earth-shaking palm, he would still be able to easily control the situation. Chapter 39. Chapter 39 Killed. Ling Han raised his fists, a fearful aura erupting from him. Dashing Panther Fist, yellow grade high-level martial arts technique. He had been practicing his sword skills these few days, so there was naturally not much progress in regards to his fist techniques. However, this fist technique was retained from his last life, so he would naturally not be unfamiliar with it. Even if it had not reached the point where he had mastered this fist technique, he had still reached a level that would take any other person tens of years of practice to reach. After all, when it came down to it, the prowess he had once possessed as a martial artist in Heaven tier didn't disappear without a trace. When he used this fist technique, it was as if he transformed into a panther on the hunt, cruel, bloodthirsty, and terrifying. Pun pun pun! Ling Han had already engaged Qing Xiaoyuan in a fierce battle of strength. What kind of fist technique is this? The Ling clan has 3 ultimate martial arts techniques. One is a sword art, one is a staff technique, and the last one is a palm technique. They don't have any fist technique. Could it be that this is a yellow grade low-level martial arts technique? But would a yellow grade low-level martial arts technique have such great power? Everyone was gasping in surprise, all astounded by the strength Ling Han had displayed. Qing Xiaoyuan's heart was filled with incomprehension. He had already used a yellow grade high-level martial arts technique, but why was he still unable to overwhelm Ling Han? Could it be that a minor character from this insignificant gray cloud town had also managed to obtain a yellow grade high-level martial arts technique? Impossible. That's definitely impossible. They had only exchanged a few blows, yet the pressure on Qing Xiaoyuan grew larger and larger. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. The reason was, the power behind his opponent's every punch seemed to be continuously increasing, making it seem as if this guy had just learnt this fist technique, and as he continued to use it more and more, the power behind his attacks too increased further. Actually, he wasn't mistaken, it was the truth. Dashing Panther Fist was a martial arts technique Ling Han had used before reaching Gushing Spring Tier in his last life. He had not used it for a very long time, and now that he had picked it up again, he was naturally out of practice. However, a genius would always be a genius. They had only been battling for a while, and Ling Han had already come into his own, and was slowly displaying the power behind this fist technique. A yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique theoretically would be able to increase the user's battle strength by 70 to 100%. However, how much actual power would actually be released depended on the martial artist's grasp and comprehension of this martial arts technique. Otherwise, a yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique may not even be able to compare with a yellow-grade low-level martial arts technique. Qing Xiaoyuan could release about 80% of the power behind Earth's shaking palm, yet Ling Han could release 90% of the power of his own martial arts technique, and the amount of power he released was still increasing. In this manner, Qing Xiaoyuan was naturally at a disadvantage, and it was becoming more and more obvious. This was Ling Han's ability, and he had only just stepped into Element Gathering Tier. Had he reached the peak of the first layer of Element Gathering Tier, he'd be able to evenly match an opponent in the 5th layer of Element Gathering Tier. Genius! Who would have thought that the trash from the Ling clan was actually such a genius? It's really inconceivable. Since he's such a genius, why had he been so low-key in the past? Let me tell you a secret. When Ling Dongxing returned to the Ling clan residence years ago, he was completely covered in blood, holding an infant in his arms. You mean, Ling Dongxing had been hunted down by some powerful martial artist, and that's why he and his son had kept such a low profile? But then, why has Ling Han chosen to erupt now? You asked me. And whom should I ask? Previously, although Ling Han had defeated both Cheng Xiang and his brother within the grounds of Grey Cloud Academy, it made only a vague impression on the minds of most people. After all, there was only a limited number of students who had actually witnessed the scene. But the situation was completely different now. Ling Han had not only broken through to Element Gathering Tier, but had also displayed a remarkably powerful battle prowess, pushing his image to new heights. After all, in Grey Cloud Town, those who had actually broken through to the Element Gathering Tier would enter the ranks of the strongest warriors. Ling Han continued to throw out his fists, and soon, what appeared to be an unknown fist technique became more and more practiced. His moves quickly became stronger and stronger, nearing a complete 100% of power released. Fist techniques were analogous to sword arts as they could form fist chi, which could consecutively solidify into fist ray. According to legends, in ancient times, when a star fell from the skies, a powerful warrior stepped forward bravely, and with one fist, shattered the star. This powerful warrior was an elite martial artist that had mastered fist techniques. Moreover, he had not only managed to form fist ray, but had also grasped the highest mastery level of fist techniques, fist heart. Similarly, the highest mastery level of sword arts was sword heart, while for saber arts, it was saber heart. Ling Han did not have such high talent in fist techniques. He had not even managed to form fist chi. After all, he was better at sword arts. However, even his current level of fist techniques was more than enough to deal with Qing Xiaoyuan. He used exiting cloud step, making it seem as if his figure was floating. Those in body refining tier could only feel the sight in front of their eyes blurring, as if they had seen several images of Ling Han, and had completely no way to identify which one was the real one. Pun! 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 He was completely at an advantage. Qing Xiaoyuan only managed to block a part of his continuous barrage of fists, and some blows had already found their targets on his body. Although no vital parts of his body were hit, Qing Xiaoyuan still felt pain on a level that almost caused him to tear up. Ling Han had completely no intention of holding back. This guy had obviously already planned to kill him, and thus anger Ling Dongxing, causing him to lose control in his rage, which in turn would enrage Qin Fenglai. Thus, they would easily have a ready-made excuse to kill both him and his father. Since Qing Xiaoyuan was so malicious, why should he hold himself back? One fist followed after another, and the speed of his attacks rapidly increased, slowly forming a flash of fist chi. With every sweep of a fist, there would definitely appear a splatter of blood on Qing Shaoyuan's body. Fist chi, like sword chi, was incomparably powerful. At the highest mastery level, there was nothing in this world that cannot be shattered with one fist. What is that? Such a terrifying attack power! That's true, it's as if he had fixed an exceptionally amazing sword onto his fist. I know, that's fist chi. What's fist chi? Sword, saber, fist, palm, and so on. One who puts their entire focus on one path would be able to form chi, which greatly increases the power of a martial artist. How is it I've never heard about this before? That's because there are only a very rare few that can actually form chi. They have been acclaimed as the rulers amongst martial artists. Everyone was shocked at the power Ling Han had displayed, and with the helpful explanation from a knowledgeable old man, they realized the terrifying strength of fist chi. Naturally, they were even more astonished. Could it be that an exceptional genius was going to appear from within the ranks of Grey Cloud Town? Meanwhile, there was no one more astonished than Lu Yutong, because she knew that Ling Han had not only managed to form fist chi, but had also formed sword chi before this, and actually possessed 4 flashes of sword chi. What kind of monster was this guy? Yet Ling Han took no pride in his achievement. As one who had been a strong warrior of heaven tier, being able to form chi was merely within his expectations. The slight difficulty would be when he tries to form chi into ray and heart would be the actual real challenge. Killing intent flashed within his eyes, and his fist flew out all of a sudden. The power behind it had instantly increased by several times. With Qin Fenglai overseeing things, in a normal situation, it would be very difficult for him to kill Qing Shaoyuan, as Qin Fenglai would definitely take action to stop him. Thus, he had to kill Qing Shaoyuan in one move. After such a long battle, he could naturally identify his opponent's weak point. Additionally, he had not used his full power previously, conserving his strength for this last killing move. No! Qing Shaoyuan's face was filled with terror. The power behind this fist was too much. He had no way of blocking it and coming out alive. Pun! A fist flashed out, and Qing Shaoyuan gazed at Ling Han blankly. Pa! His legs grew soft, and he knelt on the ground as his upper body swayed before he toppled loudly onto the ground. His heart had exploded, and he was dead. How dare you, brat! Qin Fenglai suddenly stood, and flames of rage burned strongly within his eyes. Qing Shaoyuan was his disciple only in name, but no matter how it was, he was still a proud member of Stone Wolf sect. He was not someone the young master of a tiny little clan in Grey Cloud Town could kill. His killing intent surged out completely. The pride of Stone Wolf sect could not be tarnished. He wanted to kill Ling Han. Old man, if you don't want to die, then I advise you not to have any wild thoughts, Ling Han said deeply, as he turned to look at Qin Fenglai. Everyone on the scene bore the same thought. Ling Han had gone mad. Chapter 40. Chapter 40. Qin Fenglai bows his head. He killed a disciple of Stone Wolf sect first, and now he's threatening Qin Fenglai. How bold was he? Stone Wolf sect was the overlord within the radius of 1,000 miles. Compared with such a powerful entity, no matter if it was the Ling clan or the Qing clan, either clan had the qualifications to be compared with it on the same level. Was Ling Han deliberately seeking his own demise? Qin Fenglai was startled for a moment, for he had been shocked by Ling Han's gaze. It was as deep and as vast as the ocean, filled with dignity, as if it belonged to a supreme warrior. However, he quickly realized that he had actually been threatened by a mere martial artist in element gathering tier, and could not help laughing, and deeply said, "Oh, and how do you plan to kill me? I don't need to do anything. Within 5 days you'll die anyway," Ling Han said calmly, and pointed a finger at Qin Fenglai. "About 10 days ago, when you were cultivating, did you encounter some trouble?" Qin Fenglai's expression instantly changed. Just as Ling Han had said, while he had been cultivating 10 days ago, he suddenly felt as if he had comprehended something, and decided to break through to the 4th layer of gushing spring tier, yet did not succeed. On the contrary, he accidentally caused the origin power within his body to enter the wrong pathways, but thankfully, he managed to withdraw in time, and so there was not too much damage done. How did this brat know that? Had he guessed? Ling Han smiled and said, "Try to press on the spot 3 inches below your left ribs." Chen Fenglai's first natural reaction was to say, "How preposterous," but his hand could not help moving and pressing down on the spot 3 inches below his left ribs. With a light touch, his entire expression changed once again. Pain, excruciating pain. And the spot half an inch to the right of the 7th bone of your spinal column, Ling Han continued to say. Chen Fenglai once again touched that exact spot, and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. This was definitely not normal. You overdid it when you were cultivating. You don't sense anything wrong, because you are still in that state of madness, Ling Han said before revealing a confident smile. I can save you. Chen Fenglai clenched his teeth and said, Fine, you teach me how to cure myself, and I will forgive your sin this time. Elder Chen. Chen Wenkuan was both shocked and enraged. Wouldn't that mean that Qing Xiaoyuan had died for nothing then? En? Chen Fenglai turned his glare towards Qing Wenkuan, his eyes filled with malevolence. How could a minor character like Qing Xiaoyuan compare to the importance of his own life? Qing Wenkuan hurriedly shut up, cold sweat beading on his forehead. To actually dare to talk back to a strong warrior in gushing spring tear, he would die a meaningless death. Yet Ling Han only shook his head, and said, In any case, you're in the gushing spring tear, and yet your life is only worth so much? Chen Fenglai's heart was filled with fury, but as his life was held in the hands of another, he could not allow himself to display any of his rage. He could only suppress the flames of anger and say, Then what do you want? Ling Han smiled softly and said, That will depend on your performance. Chen Fenglai was extremely depressed. He was the 9th elder of Stone Wolf sect and a powerful warrior of gushing spring tear. Under normal circumstances, he would be the one standing at the top, holding court over others. When did he become someone that could be easily manipulated by a puny, little martial artist in element gathering tear? But what else could he do? His life was held in Ling Han's grasp. From the moment Ling Han had accurately pointed out the day he had experienced trouble in his cultivation, and through the agony he felt when he pressed down on the 2 acupuncture points, he no longer held any doubt and fully believed Ling Han's words. Do you have any commands then, young Master Han? He lowered his stance. Pooh! Hearing the words, Young Master Han, all the observers immediately gasped in shock. That was an actual elder from Stone Wolf sect, a real warrior in the gushing spring tear, and he actually addressed Ling Han as young Master Han. How could this not induce astonishment? Ling Han revealed a soft smile, and said, Are you planning to get the method of solution and then kill me? How could that be? Chen Fenglai hurriedly gave a dry laugh, yet he had already started sweating. Ling Han's heart was clear, he naturally would not allow himself to be in danger. He would cure Chen Fenglai, but would definitely not cure him entirely in one go. He pointed at Qing Wenkuan and said, This man annoys me, thrash him for me. Qing Wenkuan's face instantly turned green. The reason why he had invited Chen Fenglai was to gain a powerful support for himself so as to resolve the problem of Ling Dongxing's closing in on them at every step, causing the stagnation of the finances of the Qing clan and leading to the entire clan being forced into a corner. But he had never imagined that this helper he had invited would actually turn around to help the Ling clan. How could he not be sullen at this? If anyone were to give him a piece of tofu now, he would definitely knock himself to death with it. Senior Chun! He stuttered. In front of a powerful warrior of gushing spring tear, his cultivation level of the 9th layer of element gathering tear was practically helpless. En? Are you planning to fight back against me? Chen Fenglai said coldly. Qing Wenkuan had no relationship with him anyways, so naturally, he had absolutely no conflicted feelings about giving the guy a good thrashing. He had already bowed his head to Ling Han just now, so he might as well just go ahead and throw caution to the wind. Qing Wenkuan's expression changed multiple times, before he finally just gritted his teeth, and said, "I dare not." If he dared resist, he would definitely die. Even a blind man could tell that Chen Fenglai was extremely unhappy now. "Pa! Pa!" Chen Fenglai raised his hand and lowered it, gifting Qing Wenqun with 2 slaps. The strength behind his blows caused blood to stain the corners of Qing Wenqun's lips. There was complete silence in the main hall. The only thing disturbing the silence was the harsh breathing of the audience. Who would have thought that things would play out in this manner? Even Ling Dongxing had never imagined that his son was so capable as to be able to control a powerful warrior in gushing spring tear, causing him to be both shocked and comforted. He truly had a good son. The faces of Cheng Xiang and his brother kept twitching. If there was a hole in the ground now, they would really want to go and hide in it. They had been so confident and arrogant previously, thinking that they could now regain their lost pride. They had never expected that even their old man would be thrashed now. The banquet tonight could practically be added to the Qing clan's history of dishonor. Even when Qing Wenqun spat out a tooth and swallowed blood due to the thrashing, he still dared not display the slightest anger on his face. Still, no matter how shrewd he was, there was no way he could still put on a carefree expression. The veins on his forehead were protruding, showing that he was obviously at the deepest levels of his fury. "Ling Clan! Ling Clan! I swear, I will definitely destroy you until nothing is left!" He roared angrily within his heart. "As long as third uncle successfully breaks through to gushing spring tear, we will definitely be able to avenge ourselves." Ling Han nodded and said to Chen Fenglai, "I will write a medicine formula for you, which will help you suppress your injuries temporarily. You will not have any trouble for half a year's time." Though Chen Fenglai did not want to accept this, he also knew that Ling Han would definitely not cure him completely in one go. If it were him, he too would have reservations. After all, Ling Han was the weaker party here. He could thus only nod and said, "Many thanks, young Master Han." As things have already played out to this step, the banquet was obviously at an end. Staying any longer would only be awkward. The guests excused themselves one after another while Ling Han left the Qing clan residence in the company of Ling Dongxing and Lu Yutong after handing over the medicine formula to Chen Fenglai. "Ha ha!" On the carriage, the hearty laughter that Ling Dongxing had tried so hard to hold back was finally released. He waved a fist vigorously and said, "I have competed with Qing Wenqun for over half of my life, but I have never released my pent-up anger like tonight. However, Honor, tonight was still quite dangerous. Had Qin Fenglai not experienced trouble in his cultivation some days ago, the matter tonight would not have been resolved so easily. After all, a disciple of Stone Wolf's sect had died tonight." Ling Han smiled. If he had not noticed that there was something wrong with Qin Fenglai, he would still have 2 alternatives to choose from. The first alternative was naturally simple, to not kill Qing Xiaoyuan, while the second alternative was to still kill Qing Xiaoyuan, but reveal Lu Yutong's identity to take care of the issue. But he no longer needed to consider this problem now. 1 more month, and the Qing clan would not even be able to pay the salaries of their own guards. At that time, it'll be our Ling clan who will be the sole power in Grey Cloud Town," Ling Dongxing declared proudly and enthusiastically. Chapter 41. Chapter 41 Ma Lang. After the battle at the Qing clan residence, the 2 clans who had been of equal status in Grey Cloud Town set off towards 2 different destinies. The influence of the Ling clan increased day by day, and they soon possessed enough power to be proclaimed the most dominant clan in Grey Cloud Town. On the other hand, the Qing clan was trapped in a huge dilemma, forced into a corner. One of the reasons behind it was the stagnation of their economy, but the other more important reason was the fact that their morale had received a heavy blow. Ling Dongxing really did have a good son. This was currently the common understanding amongst the townspeople of Grey Cloud Town. None of them would recall the fact that just 2 months ago, this good son had still been a publicly acclaimed piece of trash and considered a complete joke. The smaller clans in the town began to have frequent dealings with the Ling clan, hoping to become in-laws with the Ling clan. Their target naturally was the previously famous trash, and the currently well-known great genius, Ling Han. Of course, the Shin clan thus became the butt of their jokes. Initially, they had already claimed Ling Han, this excellent potential son-in-law, yet they themselves decided to go back on their own word and reject him. Many wondered how Shin Ziyan was feeling now. Qin Feng Lai had just left, but another member of the Stone Wolf sect arrived. His name was Ma Lang. He brought with him a law enforcement team, aggressively interrogating each and every clan, apparently looking for someone. When Ling Han found out, his heart stirred. Could it be that these people had come because of Hang Zhan? Very soon, Ma Lang and his group had arrived at the Ling clan residence. The Stone Wolf sect was overlord within the nearest 1,000 miles. Ma Lang was here on behalf of the Stone Wolf sect, so no matter who it was, everyone had to give him enough face. As a result, the high-ranking members of the Ling clan had all gathered at the main hall to receive this special envoy. Ling Han arrived a bit late, and when he entered the main hall with Liu Tong in tow, it was already fully occupied. He gave a shake of his head to the servant who had been about to greet him before quietly walking over. There was only one person amongst those present who was not a member of the Ling clan, and that was a young man all dressed in white. He seemed to be about 23 or 24 years old and looked very average, yet there was a very powerful aura being exuded from him, full of an extreme self-confidence. The only flaw was the fact that the smile on this guy's face was much too false, inducing disgust in those who saw it. Aside from him, there also stood a line of people dressed entirely in black outside the main hall. All of them were in element gathering tier, but their cultivation levels weren't very high. It appeared that the average cultivation level among them was either second or third layer. None of them seemed to have entered into the fourth layer. Fourth layer and seventh layer will forever be a difficult barrier to breach. This young man in white should be Ma Lang then, Ling Han thought, once again turning his eyes towards the former. His cultivation level was much higher than his companions as he had already reached the sixth layer of element gathering tier. Within this area, along with his apparently young age, he definitely would deserve the name of genius. The power of Shin Ziyan, Cheng Xiang and such so-called geniuses was less than nothing when compared with this young man. Ling clan head, within the recent month, has any of your clansmen entered the vicinity of the Balanced Mountain? Ma Lang asked. Ling Dongxing's heart skipped a beat. He naturally knew very well that Ling Han had just returned from his trip to Balanced Mountain, but now that Ma Lang had so coincidentally asked about it, how could he not be slightly alert? However, no matter how it was, he has had many years of experience in the position of clan head, and so was of course very shrewd. His expression did not change the slightest as he said, "As far as I know, none of my clansmen entered the vicinity of the Balanced Mountain." Thankfully, Ling Han had both left and returned very secretly. The other members of the clan only knew that Ling Han had disappeared for about a month, but none of them knew where exactly he had gone. "Is that so?" Ma Lang gave a nod of his head and did not say anything else. He simply sat there with his eyes closed, seemingly deep in thought. Ling Dongxing was well aware of the situation, and hurriedly had someone present a wooden box, and said, "Young Master Ma must have had a difficult journey. Please accept this small token of sincerity from the Ling clan, young Master Ma." Ma Lang finally opened his eyes, and received the wooden box. He made no pretense of modesty, and actually opened it on the spot. Inside only lay several thick pieces of paper, but when Ma Lang flipped through the contents, a smile appeared on his face. These pieces of paper were monetary notes. Each piece had a denomination of 500 coins, and there were in total 4 pieces, which equated to 2,000 coins. This was really quite a large sum of money. He had come here on a mission, yet had already intended to seek monetary gifts. Who would not fear and respect him when he had brought with him a law reinforcement team from Stone Wolf sect? After all, he was now considered a representative of Stone Wolf sect. He had made his rounds around all the minor clans of Grey Cloud Town, leaving the Ling and Qin clans last. As expected, great clans will be great clans. They were always very generous with their gifts. As he had already gotten his hands on benefits, he naturally felt very pleased. He suddenly stood and said, I am under command of our 7th elder and am currently trying to apprehend a murderer. If you know of anyone who has entered into the vicinity of Balance Mountain within the last month, Ling Clan head, please do inform me. I will be remaining in this town for a few more days. Of course, Ling Dongxing answered. He too stood up and said, Let me see you off, young Master Ma. Ma Lang cheerfully nodded, putting himself in the role of Imperial Envoy, both hands placed behind his back, taking big strides. Young Master Ma! And right at this moment, someone suddenly spoke. It was Ling Zhongquan. Ma Lang frowned, turning around and saying, What is it? I suddenly recalled that there is one member of the clan that had disappeared for about a month. Perhaps he had gone to Balance Mountain, Ling Zhongquan said, a cold smile playing about his lips. Oh, who is it? Ma Lang asked. This person's name is Ling Han. He is the son of our clan head. Ling Zhongquan had been waiting for Ma Lang to ask him about it, and so his reply was quick. Hearing such words, all the members of the Ling clan started cursing Ling Zhongquan in their hearts. Putting aside the fact that Ling Han was now a ray of hope to the Ling clan and a strong pillar of support for the clan in the future, even if he was the trash he had once been, as long as his surname was Ling, you still can't help an outsider hurt your own clansman. And he wanted to become clan head with this kind of temperament? The future of the Ling clan would really become bleak if he succeeded. Ling Dongxing was naturally raging in his heart, and regretted that he had not tidied up the clan. Based on the fact that they all shared the same surname of Ling, he had not been ruthless, but he had never thought that Ling Zhongquan would actually be so heartless himself. Ma Lang turned to look at Ling Dongxing and asked, Ling clan head, was there such a matter? Ling Dongxing's expression remained unchanged, as he said, My son did leave on a training trip slightly over a month ago, but he had not gone to Balance Mountain. Oh, then where had he gone? Ma Lang narrowed his eyes. 7 Wind Mountains. Ling Han stepped out. So you're Ling Han? Ma Lang turned his gaze to Ling Han. I am Ling Han. Ling Han nodded. Ma Lang stared at Ling Han, a grim expression on his face, causing all those present to feel a chill that foretold of an upcoming storm. Ha ha! He suddenly laughed, walked over and patted Ling Han's shoulder, saying, Don't be so nervous, we are just here to ask around a bit. I still have to go to the Qing clan residence, but I'll return for a visit. I think we will have many common topics to chat about. This young man really was very temperamental. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, Hope to see you again. Ling clan head, you don't have to see me off. Ma Lang gave a wave of his hands, and left together with his group of black-clad people. When his figure disappeared from sight, all those in the hall finally released the breath they had been holding. Somehow, without themselves realizing it, their bodies had been covered in a layer of cold sweat. This was a sign of how much pressure the presence of this young man had exerted on them. Poisonous snake. That's right, a poisonous snake. This young man was exactly like a poisonous snake. Anyone who shared the same space with him would be anxious to the point of perspiring. Chapter 42. Chapter 42 Schemes. After stepping out of the Ling clan residence, Ma Lang said to himself in a voice only he himself could hear, That Brad is an element-gathering tier, and moreover, he's only 16 years old. A tiny little gray cloud town, and there is actually a martial artist that entered into element-gathering tier below 20 years old. He either ate some kind of divine fruit, or obtained some kind of secret treasure. I'll have to go and ask around. To know about a person, it would actually be the fastest to find out from his enemy, because it was possible that your enemy may know more about you than you know about yourself. Ma Lang brought his people to the Qing clan residence, and half an hour later, his face was all smiles, excitement filling his eyes. 2 months ago, that brat had still been a publicly acclaimed trash, yet all of a sudden, he erupted. According to news from the Ling clan, that brat had only been maintaining a low profile in the past, but however low-key he had been, how could it have been to the point that his betrothed would break the betrothal contract with him? Hun, the people of Grey Cloud Town cannot see clearly because they are closely involved. This brat had obviously gotten his hands on some kind of ultimate treasure, and that's why his cultivation has advanced so much in such a short period of time. How else would it have been possible for a trash with the 5 elements disarray spirit base to suddenly experience such an eruption in his cultivation that he has reached element gathering tier? And it was even to the point that even 9th Elder has been bluffed by this brat. Even such a trash could get from the 2nd layer of body refining tier and into element gathering tier within a short 2 months' time, than if I managed to make use of it. Ma Lang's heart beat uncontrollably and rapidly increased. He was considered a genius existence within this generation of Stone Wolf sect. At the same time, he was also a disciple of 7th Elder, and based on power, was ranked within the top 3 disciples of Stone Wolf sect. The elders within the sect had all placed heavy hopes on his shoulders because he had a hope of breaking through to Gushing Spring tier. But if he progressed at a normal rate, that would only be possible at least 20 years later. Once I get my hands on that treasure, within 3 years, no, maybe even 1 year, I'd be able to break through to Gushing Spring tier. After all, I possess an Earth-grade medium-level spirit base. My natural talent overwhelms that trash by who knows how many times. However, the Ling clan's power is not weak either. I cannot act impulsively. Otherwise, if the Ling clan is driven to desperate action, they may even choose to destroy the treasure rather than hand it over to me. In that case, I will not be able to obtain that treasure then. Plus, if I create too much noise here, it might attract the attention of the stronger members of the sect. Then there would be no chance for me to get that treasure. Additionally, that brat seems to have some kind of relationship with 9th Elder. Although there is a big gap between the status of 9th Elder and Master, if he steps out, I still can't openly disobey him. So, this matter must be done subtly. That's right, I have quite a good relationship with Little Poison Lord Yuzhang. This person is skilled in the use of poisons, and has the nickname of Shadowless Poisonous Hands. If I make him give me a hand, I'd definitely be able to easily take Ling Han down. After I force him to hand over the secret treasure he has, I'll have Yuzhang executed and announce to the public that he is the murderer of Hang Zhan. As for the other members of the Ling clan, I'll have them all killed just in case, to avoid any possible information leaks. I'll immediately have someone send a letter to Little Poison Lord. I will remain here and pretend to befriend that brat while simultaneously inquiring about the origins of that secret treasure. Less than a month, and this secret treasure will belong to me. After Ma Lang arrived in Grey Cloud Town, he continued to hang around, and every few days, he would go to the Ling clan residence to have a drink and chat with Ling Han, as if he had hit it off with Ling Han at first sight. But on the other hand, the guy was extremely greedy, and kept finding excuses to get offerings from all the other minor clans. Intimidated by the might of Stone Wolf sect, as well as scared off by the law reinforcement team he had brought with him, he managed to succeed every time. It was almost a month since he first came, and there were angry complaints from all the clans of Grey Cloud Town. They wanted nothing more than to chase away this bloodsucker from their town. Yet Ling Han acted as if nothing was happening. He persisted in working hard at cultivating every day as he wanted to reach the peak period of the first layer of element gathering tier as soon as possible, so that he'd have enough assurance to enter into 7 Wind Mountains to search for the Earth Dragon Grass and return safely. During this month of hard work, he had almost reached the peak period of this layer. His 5 elements origin nuclei were also nearing their ultimate form. The speed of rotation could no longer be increased, not even by a little bit. Otherwise, he would immediately throw up blood. However, this rotation speed was still much faster than it had been in his last life, as the 5 nuclei had reached a perfect balance, and thus increased his capacity by quite a large amount. He had also concocted many different alchemical pills within this time period, including some medium-level return origin pills, as well as some antidote pills. This was the preparation work for dealing with the red-scaled dragon snake. He obtained the ingredients for these pills from Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. In exchange, he handed over some completed pills as payment, causing Zhu Hexian to be incomparably excited as these pills were concocted by a Grand Master, and thus had much research value. My current power level is equivalent to a normal martial artist in the 5th layer of element gathering tier, Ling Han thought, an expression of admiration appearing on his face. Immortal grade spirit base is immortal grade spirit base, all right. The owner had already obtained an absolutely advantageous position when fighting with an opponent of the same cultivation level. There was practically no chance of defeat. To take 1 month to fully cultivate a layer, this is much slower than what I had expected. However, it's still much faster than Yutong. Still, when compared with body refining tier, the natural advantage of immortal grade spirit base has decreased by a lot. If I take alchemical pills as well, then the rate can still be increased slightly. Ling Han thought. However, Grey Cloud Town was too small, so pills that could help a martial artist in element gathering to speed up his cultivation rate were very rarely sold there. Even the ingredients for such pills were rare. Ko. A knock sounded on the door. Lu Yutong entered and said, Ma Lang is here again. Ling Han revealed a disdainful smile and said, he must be thinking that I've obtained some kind of secret treasure, and that's why my cultivation progress is so rapid. He has tried to sniff out information from me quite a few times. Do you need me to send him away? Lu Yutong asked. She was in the 9th layer of element gathering tier and, furthermore, was close to reaching the peak period of the 9th layer. It would be as easy as turning over her hand to deal with a martial artist in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. No need. It seems like his patience is close to being completely exhausted. It's about time for him to lay his cards on the table. Ling Han shook his head. His eyes were bright. Ma Lang was in the peak period of the 4th layer of element gathering tier, and this would be a good opportunity for him to test out his own battle prowess. He walked towards the main hall with Lu Yutong in tow. Ling Dongxing was already seated within the main hall. Both Ling Zhongquan and his grandson were present too, though they were standing at one side, big smiles on their faces. Who knows what kind of poisonous thoughts they were entertaining? It is about time to completely dispose of Ling Zhongquan and his group, Ling Han thought. However, aside from Ma Lang, there was another young man dressed all in black. He looked like a living dead, for there was absolutely no expression on his face. Brother Ling, we haven't met for a few days, how have you been? Ma Lang stood, his eyes circling around Lu Yutong's beautiful, shapely figure, revealing some heat. Such an exceptional beauty caused even his heart to skip a beat. He swore that after he had killed Ling Han and obtained the secret treasure the latter had, he would definitely get his hands on this rare woman. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, I am very well. While Ling Dongxing commanded someone to serve tea, Ma Lang enthusiastically offered Ling Han an invitation to visit Stone Wolf Sect for fun. As Ling Han raised the teacup and lifted the cover of the cup, his expression instantly changed slightly. There was poison in the cup. He was an alchemist, and alchemists always have a very deep understanding of poisons and venoms, as some alchemical pills required certain poisonous ingredients in their concoction, fighting fire with fire. Pa! He waved out a palm, and his origin power created a tremor that instantly shattered the teacup Ling Dongxing had raised to his lips, the tea within it splattering in all directions. Hana! Ling Dongxing was shocked. He had no idea what his son was doing. There's poison in the tea, Ling Han said. What? A severe expression flashed in Ling Dongxing's eyes. His first reaction was not to doubt his son's judgment, but to turn his glare towards Ling Zhongquan and his grandson. The only one present who had the motive as well as the ability to poison their tea would definitely be Ling Zhongquan. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.